Welcome to the Big Suey, a podcast exclusive.
Risky move.
Just when you thought the show could not be more diluted.
Walk the plank!
Bam!
No more free Disney trips.
Now here's the marching band of nowhere.
Arr, matey.
Fatface.
Dan's been stress eating.
And the habitual liar.
Stugotz can't be trusted.
The Big Suey.
Yo ho, a pirate radio life for me.
Stugotz, you know how fascinated I was and many people were about the evolution of the super team producing this team of trolls with the Brooklyn Nets that was very easy to dislike from afar, but this guy was in the middle of everything that was happening with that team, and it is indisputably an interesting team.
He was in the middle of them choking?
His book, Can't Knock the Hustle, Inside the Season of Protest, Pandemic, and Progress with the Brooklyn Nets Superstars of Tomorrow. It's available now. Matt Sullivan is with us. Thank you, Matt. And you got close to all this stuff, and this is an unusual team. So let's just start with what you believe to be the most interesting parts of this team and what your reporting uncovered about how interesting the personalities were.
I think it was just complete control from day one, which was 2 years ago this week, what Woj called, quote, the clean sweep. And I just remember not being able to talk to management, talk to coaches, talk to anybody without them kind of being scared of these guys, including Kenny Atkinson, who built this whole program up. He's kind of saying, let's leave KD, the Maserati, in the case. Let's let Kyrie be Kyrie. But then Kyrie goes behind his back and gets him fired. And Kenny Atkinson's wondering, should I fly halfway across the country private with this guy and take a game off just to go to second, third, fourth opinions with him? And then he gets the axe. And then all of a sudden, the Nets are kind of, I wouldn't say tanking, but disappearing from the bubble, while KD was ready. He was ready to go in the bubble, but Kyrie and him were kind of planning their own thing. And so they've taken control of player empowerment in a way that I think obviously the movement goes back to the decision, and so does my book, kind of underlying this crazy history book I fell into the last 2 seasons. But I just think they've got an iron grip on this thing, and even Steve Nash is kind of having to lean back and play babysitter.
How did you get embedded?
I kind of knocked down the door, made friends with these guys, and asked them questions that your average beat reporter refuses to ask. I mean, I was asking about race, the anthem, police shootings in the locker room while other guys were asking about X's and O's. And I think that was why Kyrie and I had a weird bond over real talk, to the point where he's up in my DMs sending me 67-page Supreme Court rulings on indigenous land rights. And I'm like, okay. And this is at the same time when I'm asking him, did you just skip the national anthem? Because I was just noticing this stuff off the court. The book doesn't really have a lot of on-court stuff at all. And they were skipping the anthem, he and KD, all of this season. He
was smoking the entire time, right?
Well, I think KD would be the one who was probably smoking while Kyrie was burning the sage. I think that's kind of how they balance out.
What are some of the things that you learned that people don't know, because you got awfully close to this thing?
Let's say Kyrie's actually not that crazy so much as trying to find himself. He keeps saying that I'm relatively young as my life goes. Maybe I'm on the back half of my career, but he wasn't just buying a house for George Floyd's family. He wasn't just out here putting James Baldwin posts on his Instagram. He'll do these random acts of kindness, if you will, left, right, and center. He just doesn't take credit for it. Like, there was a kid 2 weeks ago who got shot in California, tells his doctor randomly, Kyrie Irving's my favorite player. The doctor on a lark reaches out to Kyrie's team, and now he's buying that kid a house, disability approved and all that. So I think he's a good guy who just can't articulate himself. And so the more I talk to him, on and not on the record, he displayed a human affection, a fatherhood, but also a fed-upness, if you will, about the world. And so that whole quote-unquote pause he took, and he gets caught in the maskless video of this family party, he basically took that pause, partly paternity leave, which is cool, but also precipitated by the Capitol riot, by there being no charges for Jacob Blake. So I think he's brought out that conversation into the forefront, like mental health, this is just a day job, but he's living it every day whenever he damn pleases.
We have not heard Kyrie and KD skipping the anthem. What do they say about that?
It's a private decision. They're not going to be out here like Kaepernick was originally, kind of staking their claim. It's more of just Hoopers are sick of the anthem, right? And it took a reporter to notice Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf skipping the anthem back in the day, kind of the original Kaepernick. It took a reporter to notice Kaepernick and get him to speak out and really become an activist. So I noticed, but I think the arc of the anthem may have been so watered down in terms of kneeling and Cap's protest kind of becoming meaningless that weekend in 2017 when Trump went after Cap, Trump went after the Warriors, and then even Jerry Jones is taking a knee by the end of the weekend. But the NBA was freaked out that back then, up from Adam Silver on down, the NBA players were going to hurt the bottom line by taking a knee. I think Kyrie, KD, a lot of other players in these kind of shrinking phalanxes while the anthem's playing just don't give a damn anymore. And so I don't think they're trying to make a statement so much as just not be with it anymore.
Matt, give us something about Kevin Durant that would surprise us.
He smokes even more weed than you would think. and like I was at his house at 1 o'clock in the morning. The entire place just reeks. But he also just really cares about hoop. Like we were talking sneakers, there was a little party going around, and all he wanted to do was show me his iPhone video of his Achilles recovery, because that's really all he cares about. Like he doesn't have a girlfriend. He doesn't go on crazy vacations. When he has the, I'm me, I do me, and I chill, that kind of is him. But he also flexes a lot behind the scenes. Like he also really tried to get Kenny Atkinson out of there, Steve Nash in there. They were chilling the whole time of like the bubble when they said they were doing this quote unquote search for, Jacques Vaughn and diversity during the Summer of Reckoning. And he was chilling with Steve Nash on Manhattan Beach. And he knew he was the guy. And I think the big thing is that Steve can have this there's a secret motto the Nets have had this past season, quote, protect the group. And I think that's what Steve is there for, is to lean back and let these guys be them, babysit when they can, but also, come down on guys and say, look, your buddy DeAndre Jordan is washed. He's not going to get these minutes that he used to get just to keep you guys happy. So it's a balancing act there, and I think KD hasn't quite flexed every muscle and is willing to lean back a little, just like the 75-year-old man James Harden does when he just passes and sits on the three-point line, not shooting anymore.
Why is he so sensitive?
He is sensitive. He wears it on his sleeve, but he's still weirdly out here being aggressive in his DMs. And I don't think that's changed since he was in the Bay. And, I talked to Steve Nash for a while about this, and he said he took KD out for a drink when he was just kind of sick of KD, being up in his DMs, the burner accounts and all that. And he takes him out. He kind of prepares the lesson, and he says to KD, you know what I respect about LeBron? I respect that when he got to Miami, he got sick of the narrative, sick of the haters, all the talk. So you know what he did? And KD kind of sits there like, what's that, coach? Has a sip of his drink, and Kerr says, LeBron just said, can I curse on here?
Yes.
LeBron just said, fuck it. And then he was great again. Same with Michael, with Kobe, all the greats. So they had to say, fuck it. And then they were all on that next level. So you know what you have to do? And KD leans back and says, what's that, coach? Go out and be you. You just got to say, fuck it, like LeBron did. But then, even though the Warriors kind of rolled from there, Steve's telling me that, he tried to get KD to stop looking at his phone all the time, to stop, beefing with Draymond and then beefing with kids on Twitter. And he said, I tried, but I failed. I could just see the strain on his face every day, especially that third year, just all day. But it was really, he was staring into that phone all the time. So he can't get over this. I mean, he says he's beyond it, but he's out here having, GOAT top 5 debates and making sure he's in that conversation. So I don't think he's really changed since the Bay. And the only difference is that, Brooklyn lets him be him and doesn't, get in his face about it like Kerr did.
They're totally left alone. The power has reached a point where these brands and these economies, these guys are answering to largely no one.
Yeah, a very high-ranking official with the Nets who had a lot to do with the money said basically there's a blank check as soon as these guys got here, whether that's buying a girlfriend or a girlfriend on the side, a house in California for a week, whether that's just putting up money for the boys and the homeboys and equipment for random shit. They're totally cool with that. And so I think that's what makes the Nets a modern franchise, is not their fancy practice facility or their defensive schemes. It's just that they're willing to put up with this. And maybe the Clippers weren't able to do that when they kind of pulled that, clean sweep 2.0 that weekend 2 years ago. And so they've had some difficulty transitioning to that, where Ty Lue comes in and kind of does what Steve Nash has had to do, is just be like, okay, whatever, let him hoop and figure out some sets, and we'll get these guys healthy in a room together.
Forgive me, I don't think I understood. What do you mean buying a girlfriend a house?
Just renting a house on the team dime. These guys don't pay for a lot of personal stuff themselves. And so the financial team of the Nets would kind of come every week or so. They'd be like, okay, like we thought we had this under control. We got to redo the budgets every week. And they were like, it was just a new thing every damn time.
I haven't heard any of this stuff. Now, you've done hundreds of interviews, and this is a thoroughly reported thing. You're an award-winning editor from Bleacher Report and Esquire. The things you're saying, though, that seems, among other things, that seems like a salary cap violation. I don't believe you're allowed to just rent girlfriends' homes on the team's dime. That sounds like something that when people find out about it is going to incur penalties. That's not kosher, I don't think.
There's a lot of things that the Nets do that aren't kosher. There's a reason they have this kind of Kremlin-esque wall around everything they do. During the middle of COVID, they were working out half the team, well, really Kyrie, KD, and their friends on the team out in Kobe's old gym in California. You weren't allowed to do that during COVID. You had to have all these strict protocols, one coach, one this, masks, gloves on while you touch the basketball. But they were running like a secret camp the whole time, trying to get KD and Kyrie in shape. And from what I understand, from what some people told me, is also articulating who they wanted on this team, kind of puppeteering, watching some of these young guns in the bubble, basically letting them lose and figuring out who they wanted to keep on the super team. You know, all the while Kyrie's painting and saging and tweeting or Instagram posting manifestos about, Black Lives Matter and why he doesn't believe in that mainstream movement from his car outside of Kobe's gym before he goes and does these secret runs with what would become the super team, including James Harden, who ended up in that gym too while they formed this team on Election Day while Chris Paul was also around.
Are you at all worried about KD and Kyrie's response to this?
I think they're happy to act like this book doesn't exist because they know there's a lot of stuff that is just the real them, the real franchise. And if they choose to have their Kremlin wall of silence, that's cool. I think KD understood that this book from the beginning, and I was really upfront with him. I wasn't going to tweet during the season. I wasn't going to let all this out of context. And if we did this unvarnished look, it could really be a look at power and fame and race and social and not all the shit that's been written about them ad nauseum. So I just left a lot of that backstory about them and, frankly, their personal lives out of the book and just kind of looked like, okay, how do these guys take their force field and impose their will to get what they want out of life, but also out of their careers before they're over?
What's most likely to upset them?
I think this anthem thing is annoying to them, honestly, just because they didn't want to get found out. And that's fine. I think the whole Kenny Atkinson firing where KD kind of brought the, Sky the easy money sniper down at the last minute, they would just as soon say, oh, it was a mutual parting of ways. But it's okay. Like, I don't mind pissing them off because this is just the unvarnished truth about who they are and their control. But honestly, I think if you read the whole thing, you get a pretty fair picture of Kyrie. I don't think he's been given that space to be loved and, eyebrow rolled at the same time. And I think this thing makes him look like a good man and KD look like the true hooper that he is, who's ready to build this dynasty that's been on hold for a while now.
What's most likely to bother the Nets and the NBA?
I think the NBA was pissed off that I found out how desperate the Knicks were to lure KD to the point where he'd already made up his mind, like earlier than the quote-unquote 2 max slots Zapruder tape. KD had been at Kyrie's place in Boston, and they'd been eating over wine and vegan burgers and vegan smoothies, playing as themselves on 2K, and just they weren't happy where they were, and they were ready to make their move. So KD had basically made up his mind to play in Brooklyn while he was playing in the finals with the Warriors, which is fine. That's his prerogative. These guys text all the time. I'm sure it wouldn't make the Warriors happy. But then he'd already made up his mind, and still, before free agency opens, before that quote-unquote clean sweep, KD's dad gets a Zoom invite from Steve Mills and Scott Perry, wherever they're existing in Knicks purgatory these days, just desperately trying to get KD to come. And KD has already made up his mind, and his dad texts him, talking about Brooklyn, says, the Knicks is Mecca. If you want to do it big. If you want to be a New Yorker, be a Knick. And KD's basically like, don't fuck with my plan here. Don't get me in trouble. And dad shot back like, are you doing this for Kyrie just because he's your buddy? And KD said, no, I'm doing this for myself. So again, these guys have the power. They know it. They try not to break the rules. Some people do. Some people get caught. But I think the NBA is honestly looking the other way on all this stuff and just accepts player empowerment as the lay of the land. And, throwing out a tacit fine here and there is nothing to KD with his $300 million Nike contract.
I'm guessing, though, that now that some of this reporting comes out, that there's going to be people discrediting you or finding ways to knock your credibility. What is the retort to that?
I did 400 interviews. I checked every side, like that conversation at the bar. I ran it by KD. I ran it by Steve Kerr. None of this is fake news. When I hear a rumbling that nobody else hears, it's honestly because, the Nets beat reporters, as much as I love them, they do ask the X's and O's questions. This, separation that COVID has provided has really made reporting difficult for guys. And I had all these guys' cell phone numbers. I was marching in the streets of Brooklyn with them. I was meditating on Zoom with players in the middle of COVID. So I'm not saying I'm their buddies, and they might not like what came out, but I was honest with them. This is going to be real. You don't get to read this till it comes out. And, whether I was doing the full money ball or not, it's kind of the anti-money ball in that I don't care about the GM or the X's and O's. But that's what they signed up for, and maybe they don't like it, but it was a historic year. Nobody could have predicted that this went from, the China thing to Kobe dying, and then all of a sudden COVID hits. The Nets have more players test positive than anybody. KD kind of gets this positive test that shakes up the world along with Tom Hanks to be like, holy shit, this is real. But the Nets also got all those tests that nobody was getting, who had COVID as a regular public citizen. And then the protests are going on outside Barclays, which seems great. And the Nets would have you think that they're the epicenter of protests, but they're like shutting down activist advances to do defunding of the police. So I'm not going to paint a rosy picture just because the Nets want to be this kind of franchise of the future. They could be, but it comes with all the particulars of, normal life.
How did you get the trust of these people?
It just took time. They basically gave me a press pass and said, make friends. We're not going to treat you any differently than any other beat reporter. Ask questions at the press conference and get to know these people. And so soon enough, I just kind of showed up everywhere, every day, hung out in practice on the sidelines, but also at these guys' apartments, at their favorite restaurants, at their hangouts, their bars, their secret bar that I knew they hung out with helped me reconstruct scenes of them all going there for a very weed-heavy seance after Kobe died. And so reconstructing these scenes based on their trust, it took, 10 more interviews just for one little particular. But they kind of got me there and told me the beginning of a story that I nailed down into a lot of scenes in this, accidental history book.
One of these things, when it emerges, the reporting on this is really thorough and is comprehensive. And I don't know what's going to happen next for you because there's a lot of details in here that people have not heard about before and I believe are going to be surprised by and not like. I don't know if everyone is ready for the heat that's going to come with this because some of the stuff in here is not what the marketers would want, the publicists would want, the agents would want, but these people don't have to care about any of that, correct?
Well, Kyrie and KD have basically, they control when they talk to the media and when they don't. Like the PR people for the Nets are perfectly nice, but they're scared of KD and Kyrie. So if those guys want to talk on their own terms or KD's podcast or whatever, that's fine. But that's not going to stop players from now speaking the truth. And to the point where Kyrie was empowered enough to swat guys off the Nets roster for this season because they didn't necessarily agree with his politics or his view of player empowerment when it came to his kind of bubble boycott call. And, Garrett Temple told me straight up, players in the leadership, if you go against what they want you to do, then they won't want you back. And he said, if that's the case, then I don't want to be on this team. And, he ended our kind of conversations for the book by saying, but Kyrie's the enigma of the century. So who the fuck knows?
How many guys did they do that to? How many guys did Kyrie personally run off just because he's running things?
I'd say there's a couple younger guys, Zanin Musa kind of, didn't get on his good graces and all of a sudden he's gone. And it was a great move. They got Bruce Brown and, Kyrie's, pseudo GM, pseudo coaching status, which he's very much entitled to, blends with Sean Marks being a really good GM and finding Bruce Brown off the scrap heap. The Joe Harris is off the scrap heap. But clearly KD and Kyrie, as nice guys as they are, as good teammates as they are, they're happy to sell half the team for their buddy James Harden any day of the week.
You're basically saying, right, that all of the people in power with the Nets are either allies or administrative assistants to these guys, that we've never seen anything quite like this where the guys are legitimately running everything.
Or you just stay out of the way. I mean, if you're Joe Harris, you just make friends with James Harden and find a way to look him in the eye and get your passes from him. But yeah, I mean, just look at what Harden did. I mean, we forget that he was in a COVID-filled strip club one day, and the next day the Nets are trading, terrible assets for him? What did the Rockets get for James Harden? Rodions Kurucs? He's a guy who wasn't friends with Kyrie. But I don't know, if these guys can swindle their way into another unfair super team, that's great. But it's not a lot of the kumbaya vibes that they were trying to do in Golden State. And I think these guys learned pieces from LeBron, from Steph, and they're bringing it to this kind of do whatever I want show in Brooklyn. And again, it's protect the group. They're insulated to do what they want, and the Nets just let them hoop and be them and go on their pseudo-paternity leave meets political statement meets maskless video party and act like it didn't happen. But, that kind of pissed off Nets management too. Kyrie had to apologize. He got his kind of slap in the wrist. I think some stuff got out about, me suggesting that they were going to trade him because of it, which is bullshit. It's that he's pushed it to the limit, and whether he can keep pushing it or whether he needs to kind of lean back and this is going to be the year where they vibe on the court and don't have as much drama, who knows? But again, this game and this world is so unpredictable right now that I wouldn't be surprised if the Nets continue to be really controversial. Whether they turn that into this kind of villainy is another thing, but they accept that, right? Steve Nash even kind of jokingly said in a press conference recently, we're the villains. Rawr.
What's KD like when he's high?
He's the same. He's pretty chill. He only smokes in the car because he doesn't want to, I don't know if it's get caught or that's just his happy place. But yeah, the bodyguard / housemate who got in trouble for pushing away PJ Tucker in the playoffs, he's just kind of around and takes him down to the car and they blaze and he comes back and he chills or goes out. But he doesn't do anything other than hoop, nothing. He's boring as hell. And so going out to him is just blazing. And, I think they were really happy. DeAndre Jordan told me he was pretty happy that the NBA finally got rid of, again, low-key, everybody forgets this amidst COVID, they got rid of weed testing. And so I think nobody's happier than the Nets with that.
What are the problems and the dysfunction that you witnessed?
It really got bad at the height of Kyrie being out, disappearing from the team when he had his shoulder stuff in late 2019. And the franchise legitimately didn't know where he was. That's not chemistry so much as how do you function? It's not dysfunction, it's just disappearance. And so he kind of was finding himself again. And I think legitimately this was Kyrie finding himself as a person, having time over COVID, but kind of reeling him back into the mix and allowing him to do the protest stuff, do the bubble boycott. None of that got him in trouble with the team. They've just had to figure out, how long the fishing rod is with him and when they can kind of bring him back in. I don't think they have dysfunction when they listen to those three guys. It's when coaches try to impose too many schemes or the front office gets a little too involved that these guys basically flex and say, get off me.
Did you hear the conversation between Kyrie and Bill Russell talking about fans in Boston, or was that recreated from the reporting?
So I recreated this scene where he's in the gym, summer of 18. He's gotten hurt. He's kind of goes on vacation to Vegas with KD and their entourages. He's trying to rehab in Jamal Crawford's little shitty gym in Seattle. And Bill Russell would come in every day, and tons of people in the room told me he would just kind of pull up, watch these guys play to 125 in the bleachers in his, with his cane, and then sit down. They would talk about the freedom rides. They would talk about being empowered players. They talk about politics, just sitting around campfire style. But then KD and Kyrie would go off onto the side, right? Kyrie and Mr. Russell would go off onto the side. And from what I understand from friends who were around Kyrie all that summer, talked about that classic kind of mindset that Bill Russell had of, I thought of myself as playing for the Celtics, not for Boston. And so his thinking at that time, according to literally his best friend who was living with him in Seattle that summer and went on this vision quest to the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation shortly thereafter, said, quote, it was like this power shift going on in Boston, in terms of Jalen and Jason and minutes and those guys shining without him. And then he also realized, and this is him kind of quoting Kyrie's mindset, wait a minute, I'm trying to champion Boston, but now that I'm looking at the history of Boston, is this a city that I want to champion in terms of their racial history and stuff like that? Is Boston the type of place I want to represent? So that was gestating, and then his grandfather died and changed the whole dynamic of him signing long-term, and then he was basically over it by January 2019. But it's also interesting that, as a man, as an activist, really, those ideas are gestating in his head to the point where, he's asked by Rachel Nichols whether he's ready to go back to Boston. He says, well, I hope there's no casual racism. It's the same sentiment, but I also think he's right when he pushes these buttons. It's a far cry from the flat earther shit, but he's come full circle, no pun intended, maybe, to push that button. And then look, he's right. Over the next 2 weeks, superstars are getting bottles and popcorn thrown at him all over the place. So I think Kyrie's a lot more right about this stuff than people give him credit for. But it's because he has these heady conversations, and it's like Kobe. Kobe was big on this stuff, just taking in lessons and asking questions of the great ones and not being afraid to call a spade a spade. Where did the story of Jay-Z yelling at Adam Silver come from? Oh, man. That one paragraph took me like 40 interviews to get right. Because it wasn't the Nets so much forcing black and white on the league so much as it was weird that the league didn't want black and white in their uniforms. And it got to the point where everyone was asking, like, okay, is there really data that says dark blue looks better in TV? And, an official, high-ranking executive with the Nets said, you say that to Jay-Z and you get, excuse me? Like, what do you mean that doesn't look good on black players? All of a sudden it goes from being a marketing thing to being a race thing. So, yeah, Adam Silver was then the deputy commissioner in charge of stuff like this. And Jay, from what I understand, really flexed hard on him. They didn't bring Jay in to do a lot of stuff like this. He quote unquote created the Nets identity because he was basically the only superstar around because he failed to, seal the deal with Melo back in the day and got stuck with, some B-list quote unquote A-listers. But the Nets paid off some logo designers $20,000 to say that Jay-Z created the identity. They didn't even know if Jay-Z was going to wear the new Nets jersey at the first show to start off Barclays Center. So there's a lot of smoke and mirrors. There's a lot of image building with the Nets from day one. And it's come full circle now, right? I saw Jay and Beyonce for the first time since, I think, the game where they met the other Royals, Kate and William, the night that there was the I Can't Breathe t-shirts and the Eric Garner protests outside. So there's a lot of eerie foreshadowing. And now we're at the point where finally Jay and Bey showed up again to watch the Nets be amazing against the Bucks and then have this season slither away from them. Where and how and what did you learn about Nets management spying on protesters? So this was after the Hong Kong thing, right? And Joe Tsai had been heavily criticized for basically siding with Chinese national politics, and the players have been in trouble with not speaking out or not really wanting to. And some officials told me that Joe Tsai was pretty pissed off when he discovered that there were some protesters coming into the arena. It was a big group of pro-Hong Kong activists, and he was in a difficult situation, but they could find out through Ticketmaster who was buying 100 random tickets. And they, basically surveilled on someone to know that the protesters were coming. And the protesters were smart. They snuck in this, Maury or money sign with the perfectly sized, cards that you can put together into a composite sign. And apparently Joe Tsai was really pissed off that that's the NBA rule and that they couldn't catch all these protest signs coming in. The Nets didn't believe, the players didn't believe that COVID was real. How many of them? I tried to nail the team doctor down on that. I don't want to name names, but there were some players who would come up to him and kind of joke with him, but then be serious, like, I don't know about all this. And so the doctor said, we needed to approach the unknown, and it takes a lot of convincing. This is the same thing that doctors have a lot of problems with Kyrie. Like, he didn't want to get surgery. They had to convince him that it was okay, that they weren't going to, break his body like he'd been worried about the Cavs doing and LeBron calling him soft, a couple of years earlier. So I honestly think it was okay at that time that people were having trouble confronting it. And I think it's, similar kind of mindset perhaps to getting the vaccine. There's systemic questioning of the system having to do with health and things like this. And people were scared. But I think it's speaks a lot to the Nets having these characters who are willing to push buttons, and then lo and behold, they're sitting in San Francisco after, the Rudy Gobert incident, and they're thinking, they were going to play the first game without fans against the Warriors, and then that got, shut down because of Rudy, and they're kind of sitting there having it all unfold in real time. And the doctors were really worried when they were flying back from the Bay to go get these kind of notorious tests that they got, because there were reports of people like coughing, runny noses, and, then you had KD and a bunch of the team really quite sick.
What did you learn about the NBA not being quite as liberal as we think of the NBA as, not quite as progressive as we think of the NBA?
Well, it does go back to, Silver not wanting them to take a knee. It goes to the China stuff, which, Republicans yell about, get woke or go broke. But money matters there. There were billions at stake in China. And flash forward to a year later, and I wrote this story for GQ the other day, that there's kind of two forces of good coming out of the NBA. There's the very corporate, plans that in the aftermath of the Bucks boycott, which, Kyrie was kind of right all along of whether it was a good look to be out there making billions for Disney and ESPN when you could have been fighting in the streets. But the outcome of that kind of chaos in the bubble was LeBron and CP basically getting on the phone with Obama and him telling them to build a policy team so they're not caught on their heels the next time, sadly inevitable tragedy rolls around. And so they're working on that, kind of official committee lobbying in Washington, but it's safe, right? They're happy to go with the bipartisan compromise on policing reform, on even voting reform, just to have this kind of buttoned up league office look. And then there's still the Kyrie. I mean, it's not that divided. It's just there are players who do their own thing. And then there's, Kyrie taking his days off and buying houses for people and, still going that kind of bubble boycott kind of way as the enigma of the century and being upset with the, corporatized way of doing things. I don't think Kyrie's been that present of an NBPA union vice president, but that's okay. He's, holds that power so that he can flex it elsewhere. The NBA remains kind of buttoned up despite, having a lot of press releases. I'm not saying the intentions aren't in the right place for the league and its leadership and the PA and Michelle Robertson and Adam Silver. They are the most liberal sports league. But why don't they just retire the anthem then if these guys aren't going for the anthem? I mean, what do you think about that, Dan? You think the NBA could take a masterstroke like that when they've got these billions of dollars of ESPN on the line and don't want to piss off Americans in China?
I think they've got too many white customers who disagree, and they would rather lean on their employees there and make sure to placate. It's not necessarily Republicans buy shoes too, but you're in a position where your customer base can already, at every point during the history of the league, be made uncomfortable by the black guys having too much power. And I have been surprised that business has won there, but I'm not surprised that a largely white ownership group would not allow the black players to take away the anthem.
I mean, I thought it was really cool, though, how Cuban just low-key told his stadium operators to stop playing the anthem before the game. And, the NBA quoted the, unique circumstances of the season, like, oh, that's okay. We'll allow that. And then, as you're saying that, kind of white audience, the blowback, they're like, well, you know what? Everybody's got to do the anthem this year. We take it back. So that's exactly the safe, yet, woke nature of the NBA. Is it really progressive? Is it really leftist? Is it really pushing the culture that direction? I think it's the players doing that, not the league and its press release reality.
What did you learn about Kyrie Irving saying he was coming back to Boston and then not coming back to Boston?
Well, he had that vision quest that summer with Bill Russell, and he went to Standing Rock to kind of reconnect with his roots. His mom was from there. He'd learned all this stuff about his mom and kind of connected with his grandfather, who he said, she's with him now in terms of the spirit. And so, yes, he made that promise to Boston fans, but he told KD later that, once his grandfather died, everything else in life wasn't important to me. And so I think that's when this whole basketball doesn't have to be my life thing began. And Boston, had on-court issues for sure, but I think he was just over it. And he wanted to come home, and he's a Jersey kid, grew up a Nets fan. It was summoning him home. And he had a daughter he wanted to build a house for. And I think that's why KD followed him, not the other way around.
Whatever awards they give away for writing, Matt, I'm telling you, you might win a few, you know?
It's amazing.
Yes.
Stugotz all of a sudden cares about reporting and, more importantly, cares about not having to read this because you've given him the cliff notes.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there's more that we have not gotten to, and I'm sure this will help him sell his book, and I'm sure GQ has helped him sell his book. I am interested in what's going to happen with blowback to you, Matt, because there is going to be some skepticism, even though your reporting seems thorough, and I'm curious who's going to not support what it is you're saying. I'm curious if KD might hit you with some of the stuff that he's hit Jackie McMullen with, where this framing makes it seem like we're not friends, like we're friends, but we're not friends. It sounds like you got a lot closer to KD than anybody does.
He wasn't around that much. I wouldn't say I'm friends with anybody, nor do I want to be, because I'm a journalist who has, no vested interest in my relationship with Rich Kleiman in 2 years. And so I can do, diligent reporting on his investments in Silicon Valley entrepreneurs saying, that's basically a press release too. They're not that involved, despite, the veneer of the boardroom being this great thing. And, they cashed out on Postmates. That's great. But I don't think I think he's been told to just kill it with silence. And I think the blowback that I might get, yes, there's Celtics fans, there's, diehard Nets fans that they would never trade Kyrie. Well, some people were pissed off, and you're not getting that from the typical NBA journalist. And, I'm like a real journalist who got into sports a couple of years ago, but I've investigated every police killing in America. I've freed a woman from prison. And that's what helped me ingratiate me with these players, is they knew I was a real person. But just because I don't tweet about, every press release from the NBA or haven't been in locker rooms for my entire life doesn't mean I'm not legitimate here. And like I said, I didn't let any cats out of the bag for 2 years. And so I used to, edit Howard Beck. I used to edit Jonathan Abrams, your guy Haberstroh. Like, we started our own pirate ship as kind of Grantland 2.0 at BR Mag at Bleacher Report for a couple of years before they excised journalism themselves, which is, good for people who don't like to read. But I think, I've been exploring this world, doing stories on Cap since the beginning, and this is kind of the culmination of a lot of my thinking from, this scourge of police violence to the rise of player empowerment and how those, real world issues collide with power and fame. And if that comes with blowback from the rich and famous or the trolls of individual teams, so be it. I have altered my mentions a little in the last couple of weeks in the notifications I get from Twitter. So if you guys want to tweet at me, I will see it. If, the random guys who, I did get an at mention from the guy who KD went at. It's like this 24-year-old teacher from Kentucky who KD went at, like, I don't know if he's drunk or not, from a Kanye Rock Nation concert back in the day. And this guy's like, I guess that moment changed my life, but does this guy really have to go after me? I'm just a school teacher in Kentucky.
What is the kind of detail that you think the audience would enjoy learning about the lifestyles of the rich and famous that you entered here?
They're not that exciting. I think you get the veneer of social media and these guys, player-first platforms for media. They spend a lot of time in hotels. They really miss their kids. They don't have serious, long-term relationships or a lot of love in their life. And they're really worried about their bodies, and they'll protect them at all costs. And then you get a guy like Spencer Dinwiddie, who's a, superstar of this book, who spends his off days with 10 lawyers coming at the league saying, I can IPO my own contract, or, I can start this creator galaxy without hurting my brand. And so, I can make my own sneakers, even though it's going to piss off Nike and Adidas. And I think he's, the book has a very long subtitle or whatever, but that when it said like the superstars of tomorrow, I don't necessarily mean, the future of 75-year-old man James Harden on a bad hamstring with his two buddies. I mean the Spencer Dinwiddies of the world who are seizing the, LeBron-fueled empowerment in their own way and being kind of the non-LeBrons to flex on the Nets or on the NBA and do their own thing. And I think you're only going to see more guys following in those footsteps, and you're already seeing that with, young guys getting paid and not having to be taken advantage of by the NCAA or the NBA.
Why is Spencer Dinwiddie the star of your book?
He's not the star. I mean, KD and Kyrie are the stars. I think Spencer knows how to get good press, but we also spend a lot of time having real talk about how he wasn't beholden to the Nets, how he was going to he was going to opt out of his contract no matter what. But he thought he was done when he tested positive and couldn't go to the bubble. He was fully ready. And, he wears his heart on his sleeve, I think is why he's such an important character in the book. And he's not afraid to say, yeah, I think they're going to trade half the team and me for a superstar, whether that's Brad Beal or someone else. Like, he was ready to not be on the team. And then he got hurt, 3 games into the season or whatever, hurt his ACL. And, I think he's gone to Miami or the Clippers or something like that. But I love guys who don't care about what their employer thinks of them, don't necessarily care about what the superstars say about them, because usually guys are scared of the superstars and scared of their money and too scared to do, the real shit they want to do. Like the Jaylen Browns of the world, who probably would have knelt and not given a shit what the NBA said. But, the coin is still the king, and, he was probably worried about his rookie contract. So were a lot of guys who wanted to boycott the bubble and not particularly interested in taking a knee in a Black Lives Matter t-shirt on a Black Lives Matter court in the bubble. But, sometimes you gotta secure the bag before you are willing to be yourself out loud.
He seems super interesting to me, not just because of wanting part of his contract in cryptocurrency, not just because he opted out a lot of money with Brooklyn just now, but also because of this GoFundMe where the second highest donation was $69 from a Nets fan who added the message, "The Knicks are poopy poop butt soup."
That's how deep I went, Dan, is I interviewed that guy for 45 minutes and then told Spencer about it that day. So, like, I was, when I say this guy was thinking or Spencer was believe that, like, I literally was recounting the side of the conversation with Poopity Poop Butt, who's like some Google engineer, Nets super fan, and then asked Spencer what he thought. And then, like, the next day, the Black Lives Matter protests are starting in the streets of Brooklyn, and I'm out there with a guy. And so, Tim Luau Cabarone was probably saying something he shouldn't have said about how, his GM or whatever management in Philly didn't want him to take a knee, and so they're hugging and holding arms and shit. But that's what you get when you're willing to have real talk with these guys and dribble a basketball down Flatbush Avenue for 3 hours in 100-degree heat.
Wait a minute. You have said a lot of bombshell things during this interview, but you just alleged publicly you're willing to stake your journalistic credentials on Poopity Poop Butt Soup is an engineer of some sort.
He's a great Nets Twitter superfan. The Nets have some very smart, hipster Brooklyn fans to go with their ride or die Jersey fan base.
Matt, the shit you're saying is crazy. Like, I'm sure the audience is lapping up every bit of this. I've got a smiling Stugotz next to me thinking about reading a book.
I mean, Matt, you're either
thinking about reporting.
Matt, you're either the next Jay Glazer or the next Steve Glass, and I feel like there's no in between.
You got there's this honesty. Nobody knows any of the shit you're talking about. It's all secrets.
I guess not anymore. I'm hoping that people take this, at face value and realize that real sports journalism in the NBA is hard to come by. And I mean, you guys obviously know that, ESPN keeps a pretty buttoned up version of this stuff, despite the occasional flourishes of journalism. But in this Zoom world, the players are controlling exactly what they want to say and don't have to answer any follow-up questions, don't have to do any real one-on-ones unless it's for the awkward, Rachel Nichols interview or the second quarter thing where you're missing the action and Steve Nash is trying to get through the interview as fast as possible. But it's hard for real writers who aren't the top, 5 or 6 national writers to get close to these people. And there's propaganda in press conference Zooms. And to some extent, there's propaganda in feeding stuff to Woj and Shams and Chris Haynes, who are great. But, these guys have relationships to protect. And I clearly am, letting bygones be bygones.
What did you learn about James Harden?
He kind of came in toward the tail end of my book. I learned how to come up with, I think, 13 different jokes about beard size, which I put in at the kind of last minute, to be honest, when the trade went down, and I kind of saw it coming right before my deadline. I think it's cool that he's been friends with KD, consulting with him on the 2016 Warriors decision, and that he really was up in the gym, in November, late October, early November, in this kind of Nets World West at Kobe's secret gym where the guys came back ready for the next season. And it seems by all accounts that that's where KD especially was really doing the hard recruiting, instead just like, get in Nets World, get in there now. And so on election day, when the world seemed kind of upside down, these guys were low-key hooping in Kobe's gym and changing, the course of the politics of super teams.
What did you learn about how Harden ended up there that people don't know, beyond what you've already said?
I think that's kind of it. I let the Harden trail play out for beat reporters to, I guess, not really find out. My deadline was really right there, so I'm not going to spread any fake news about stuff that I don't know, because my reporting was contained to this insane historic season from the clean sweep through election day, basically, when it looked like the Harden trade was going to go down, and the Jared Allens and Taurean Princes and Karis LeVerts of the world were kind of looking over their shoulder, wondering, how many more hours am I going to be playing basketball with these guys? And at the same time, I looked at 10 years worth of history, but I kept an eye on the Nets all this season. And I think just being able to look in the slipstream where NBA reporters weren't is how I saw this anthem thing. I don't want to project my, political beliefs or anything onto these guys, because, I think it's their choice to do a lot of these things and to flex their power or to skip the anthem. And I'm just trying to put it out there and put together some of those, eerie parallels that came from Eric Garner, I Can't Breathe, to protest outside Barclays, and Kyrie, telling his fans to tell your senators to, arrest the cops who killed Breonna Taylor and buying a house for George Floyd. These are who these guys really are. Like, I think the George Floyd thing in the house got out there while I was keeping everything under embargo, but I knew a lot of this stuff for a while. And I think if my credibility is questioned because I haven't been out there, writing stories every day about the NBA, that's fine. But I hope people will read this thing in their full context, because that was my promise to KD, to Kyrie. And I'm sure what they talk about with James and other people is that, this is what this guy said this was going to be. I didn't make any promises to be nice.
Beyond what you've already told us, what do you think sports fans or basketball fans are going to find most shocking to learn, because they haven't learned how antiseptic the reporting in the NBA actually is, because you can't really usually get close to these guys?
I think it's how a lot of the slightly older, lower paid guys are pretty fed up with the NBA machine. Someone like Wilson Chandler was really fascinating to me in, being stuck, through the China stuff, where he said, how you feel about this, how you feel about that when we're stuck in the China situation. But then when we're here, it's you don't want us to talk about politics and fucking human rights and black rights. And, he was questioning, again, how woke the NBA was, right? And I think he says, they've seen all the backlash that the NFL got, so they're like, well, we can't be the NFL, but we also can't go all the way over to this left side either. We got to be a little bit more progressive, make it seem like we have total freedom of speech, but don't kneel. That's in your contract that you can't, so don't kneel, but you can have freedom of speech. So, when I was talking to Wilson about whether he was going to go in the bubble, he was like, hell no, it won't be powerful. Just he's texting me this stuff in real time while Kyrie's, writing manifestos on Instagram in the middle of all this George Floyd stuff. And Wilson's saying, it's just the NBA and Nike capitalizing off another tragedy, branding it at its finest. Shit is a plantation. So I think these guys feel a little trapped by the empire. And I respect Kyrie calling that out and saying, it's just more ESPN and NBA stuff exploiting our likeness, exploiting our image. And so I don't want to be some woke white dude out here, exploiting the truth for book sales. To me, it was never about the book sales. A portion of this stuff's going to go to the victims of families of gun violence. I wanted to give these guys the room to speak in deeper context about how they are human beings and they have their own views. And if that means that the NBA system needs to change in order to adapt to them, I hope that those non-LeBrons kind of get what they've been searching for as the next generation comes up.
What did you learn about Kobe Bryant? Because some of your reporting about this year, the pandemic weirdness started with that grief. And that's something that reached throughout the league in a lot of different emotional and interesting places.
The book actually starts with Kyrie getting on Kobe's helicopter. This is back after the Celtics lost to the Bucks in 2019. And Kyrie's seeking career advice on, beyond the game, but also X's and O's. And then I got in the room shortly thereafter at Kobe's gym, where he had this kind of all-star seminar. Kawhi was there, Tobias, Kai, and they're having real talk about, again, that unvarnished Kobe vibe that I think has, crept into a lot of this generation after him. And, Kyrie's talking about, Brad Stevens, he has a bunch of rules, but I'm like, okay, this is actually what we're running, and we got to be great within this. And I think what's interesting about Kobe is he would indulge that but he would also take the high road. And he would say, I think he said in response to that in the room while Kyrie was eating another vegan sandwich, he's a big sandwich guy. He said that Phil Jackson taking credit for a matchup switch that helped the Bulls get to the finals once, and Jordan didn't care, so why should you care? And Kobe said, at the end of the day, you do it, you figure it out, you win, and the coach gets paid. You're welcome. So that Mamba mentality was real, but I also think Kobe, as we've all come to learn, had that kind of girl dad vibe that he was finding, sadly late in his life. And I think that's what struck a chord more than the Black Mamba with Kyrie, and he wants to really pick up the pieces. And I think a lot of the viral videos of Kyrie speaking about Kobe after his death were me asking very long-winded, hardcore, serious, kind of depressing questions in the scrum when everybody else was just asking about his 54-point game after Kobe died. But Kobe was up in Kyrie's head before the shot in Game 7. Muhammad Ali died that week, and they were talking about that. And he's also like, don't forget to tuck your right elbow. Don't forget to tuck your right elbow. And that's what he did when he hit the shot. He had Kobe in his head. And to see Kobe's presence, obviously it was that terrible day when the tragedy occurred. Kyrie just left the gym. He went home, and instead of watching the Nets play the Knicks that day, he just watched Kobe highlights, the 81-point game. And I think it was really, really hard for Kyrie. And, his trainer told me that he was worried that day would be the last time Kyrie was ever in an NBA arena again, that he would just straight up retire. Now, I think, that can be exaggerated. Kyrie said, I can see myself going off in a cloak and growing my fro out in the mist of the mountains, kind of like, remember that Sopranos episode the last season when he goes off with the hooker into the Vegas mountains. But I think that's a bit of a stretch. But I think, Kobe did have that mystical appeal to everybody, but also would text teenagers, like teenage girl hoopers and all-stars alike. And I think that's really rubbed off on Kyrie, while we'll see a different Kyrie at the memorial for Kobe, which is like this huge A-list Oscar-style, GOAT Hall of Fame gathering. Everybody's kind of mingling afterward in the tunnel, and Kyrie just walks out onto the streets of Los Angeles on the sidewalk and is just talking with the girls from Gigi's team, just being there for him. And so he's a real one. I think he gets a lot of that from Kobe, and I think Kobe, will really see the good spirit of a lot of these, these kind of mentees of his, and as the professor's legacy carries on very much off the court.
You did a hell of a job selling your book, Matt. The book is called Can't Knock the Hustle, Inside the Season of Protest.
A hell of a job writing his book.
You might have done a hell of a job or a hell of a job not selling it, because you gave us everything.
Yep.
Matt, thank you.
There's more in there. I was going to say the title of the book again to help him sell the book, and neither of you would help me do that. I
already read it.
The Hustle, Inside the Season of Protest, Pandemic, and Progress with the Brooklyn Nets Superstars of Tomorrow. It is available now. It is a very long title.
It's too long. It's too long. I agree. But Stugotz, I think the book is kind of long, but you can get the audiobook. My narrator is very good.
I just got the audiobook. I don't need it. You just gave it to me.
Thank you, Matt.
Delightful.
We appreciate it,
you guys.
sir.
Keep fighting the good fight on the Pirates.
Someone yelled, ahoy, who the hell's cabin boy? Somebody named Tony, who knows? Once we got the skip, well, Amin jumped ship, 'cause he knew we would sail to gold. Pirate radio with the ship and crew. We got wind in our sails and the sky is blue. There's a devil up our nose, so much work to do for the Pirate Radio.
We begin in the obvious place with a tweet I am going to read to you right now. A tweet that reads, I would like to thank everyone who is still wearing a mask. It saves me a great deal of time. Your mask tells me I don't need to talk to you, know you, work with you, or try to understand your mumblings. You are superfluous to requirements. Many thanks. That is from Right Said Fred.
He's very outspoken. Well, is Right Said Fred one person? I think it's a duo, the band, but I've seen a lot of quotes just attributed to one of them.
Put it on the poll, please, Chris Cody. We will wait here for Billy to get here. Right Said Fred, is that one person? Author of I'm Too Sexy. I don't know whether it's for my shirt or whether the song is just
I'm too sexy for a lot of things.
Right, but I don't know whether the title of the song is I'm Too Sexy or I'm Too Sexy for my shirt.
Well, he was also too sexy for Milan.
So it was probably just I'm Too Sexy was the name of the song.
New York and Japan and the Foo Fighters Madison Square Garden show that required everybody to be vaccinated.
On that catwalk.
Yeah. He was too sexy for that.
I can confirm it's a duo. It is Fred and Richard Fairbrass, formed in 1989.
I mean, Fred doesn't have to twist people's arm to believe that he's part of it. Richard's got a hard time.
Chris, please put it on the poll. Is Fred a terrible name? And are we still making Freds? Because you have put a difficult life on a baby when you've named it Fred. Fred has to go through life as a toddler soon thereafter, and that's just not great.
You don't see people opting for Fred anymore. They'll go Freddie, even Frederick, but just Fred, one syllable. It lands with a thud.
There are a number of things locally that I want to get to. Stugotz is already scamming. He's gone to Tahoe before anyone else. Didn't tell anyone. I found out the way Mike did late last night that he was already in Tahoe. And did he assume today was off? Did he assume the rest of the show was going to Tahoe at a more appropriate time, meaning tomorrow? He's already there with his whole family. I'm sure that's going to end up on the expense report.
With Stugotz, this is my first experience with the full Stugotz thing. So I say to Stugotz, he calls me on Saturday, hey, I'm thinking about going early because apparently there's a lot to be done there if you get there early.
He was definitely already booked, right? When he says he's thinking about it?
So I go, Stugotz, if you go, I would like to send you with some equipment so you can gather things while you're there. Call me when you decide that you're going to go so that I can meet up with you. You don't live that far from me, and I can go bring you some equipment. And then 2 days later, I get a text, I'm in Tahoe. And I'm like, when did that happen?
Correct. Welcome to our life. You're new to this experience, Whitty.
That's a punk move because Whitty would have provided some equipment that could have actually accomplished some of the pipe dreams that he was throwing out there. But now he's left to his own device, Billy, and not being able to actually help us.
Billy, why are you shaking your head? Because you're familiar with the work of this sleazy, grimy, and very real creature.
I know this isn't in vogue, but I want to defend Stugotz here. Stugotz has been fairly consistent since we started talking about this, saying, I'm going for the entire week. And we're like, well, it's not necessary. And he's like, yeah, no, but I'm going for the whole week. And we're like, no, maybe Wednesday makes more sense. He's like, no, I'm going to be there the whole week. It's like, okay, sure, if you want to, but you don't need to be.
No, but I spoke to him on Saturday, and it was still to be determined. And 36 hours later,
he'll never give you an answer on anything.
The part he's being dishonest about is he's doing all these things in group text right now. Like, I'm out here. I'm ready to work. Who needs me? And it's like, we know, Stugotz, you're just kind of out there and you're not going to do anything.
That's just so he can expense for his family vacation.
He's like, can I grab anyone for you? It's like, Stugotz, nobody's out there.
There's no one there.
It's 6 in the morning when we start recording.
He's going to grab Romo on 18 at 6
It's 5 in the morning. It's 5 in the morning. He's going to go knock on Romo's door.
Well, that's another thing. He knows that he's not getting anyone. But let me teach you, Whitty, about Stugotz. As soon as Stugotz says, I may do something, that's what he's doing, but he's not going to tell you that he's doing it because he knows that it's wrong. For example, if you ever look in the show calendar and it says Stugotz may be off, Stugotz is 100% going to be off, and you can add a day on the front end and probably on the back end to that day also, and know for sure he's going to be off all of those days.
Yep. Another thing he said in a group text yesterday was that Kelsey has totally agreed to come on. So that's one to keep.
I'm still waiting for him to come on Freedom. I'm still waiting. He has totally agreed to come on Freedom a month ago. Still waiting. So we do not have Stugotz today, and we learned about that last night.
Yeah, we expect him to jump into the Zoom and be totally boxed out and have a bad internet connection and worse acoustics.
No Greg Cody either. Unfortunately, Chris Cody has told his father not to embarrass him with what he might wear. So we're going to be deprived of the content of Greg Cody wandering around Tahoe with celebrities in boat shoes that are 27 years old.
Yeah, but I understand our fans are probably wondering where Greg Cody is. He wasn't here last week. He was under the weather. Trust me, there's going to be too much Greg Cody content over the week. They are going to grab a lot of stuff out in Lake Tahoe, and Greg found his way into this trip. I found out trying to reschedule Greg for this week that he was even going to Tahoe, which should be a blast and super embarrassing for you, Chris.
Oh, yeah.
The one we get today is Red Eye Amin. This is always an experience. He's flying in.
Is there any other kind?
Dangerous game.
His flight is
Nothing
late.
better. Nothing better.
He is, and he says that this ESPN story, he says, what is a cauldron for others is my hot tub. And so I just can't wait to whatever it is that he's got to give us. Red Eye Amin is going to bomb in here in any moment now. And also Jemele Hill, because we know you want to hear about that story in ESPN. For many years in trying to change the culture unsuccessfully. You saw how we got farted out at the end. But we were arguing on behalf of ESPN covering itself with the shining light of judgment that it puts on all others. But that's not the way that it's done over there. And so Emmanuel Acho has tweeted out.
Made him a beer pong
you can
tournament.
understand why it is that I would do that. Emmanuel Acho has tweeted that ESPN needs to do a 30 for 30 about ESPN. And Kendrick Perkins, ever the teammate, because he was a teammate yesterday as Rachel Nichols apologized for 7 seconds, and then Richard Jefferson and Kendrick Perkins had to carry. And they've got a real issue over there, just that is cut up across racial lines and gender lines and is a problem because that was a bad spot for Richard Jefferson and Kendrick Perkins to be in. But he's a good teammate. And he has come out and he has said to Emmanuel Acho, and I think he may have deleted.
Acho, you made it dodgeball.
Bro, you really need to do better. You're working for another network with your own show. Do better, homeboy. Real talk. Cleanse your soul, and carry the hell on. Kendrick Perkins being a good teammate. We will get into all of that in a second. But locally, I wanted to get into the groundbreaking that De'Aaron King is doing because some people have argued that that's going to divide locker rooms when only one guy's getting the money, but he wants to share the money. And it's now burning. It's all going to collapse because you're going to get boosters involved now with all sorts of unusual arrangements that involve sponsorship and businesses. And someone like De'Aaron King is going to be able to make a lot of money.
It's really cool that Miami is so well positioned for this. De'Aaron King made an amazing business decision by coming back to school. It helps that he's like 37 years old and he has all this life experience. It's no surprise that him and Mackenzie Milton are spearheading these NIL things. But he's got equity in all these companies. He's got multiple endorsements. I think he's up to 5. He's at the wharf with the mayor introducing yet another one of these. He's got a podcast coming out, I believe. There's rumblings of a sponsorship for every football player on the football team. I can confirm that. So Miami is really well positioned here, and I understand what you're saying. Like, it's all going to burn down because all these boosters are going to be giving kids money. They do already. They do already. Actually, Miami's really well positioned if you're looking from a football perspective, because tell me how the SEC is going to get better because of this.
It's going to be a bidding war, though, in a way that's pretty overt, though, and is going to make people uncomfortable. Yeah. Put it on the poll, please, Guillermo, at Le Batard Show. Should your senior quarterback in college have multiple IRAs? Because
but the SEC has been paying kids for decades now, right? They've been doing this, and kids are going to come to the realization, look, I can make a certain amount of money in Tuscaloosa, or I could say closer to my family and make an okay amount of money. Would you rather be rich in Tuscaloosa, or would you rather be rich in South Florida? I think the SEC has already kind of met its ceiling because they were playing by a different set of rules, and now the playing field's been leveled.
Now everyone can play. Now Texas can play if Texas wasn't playing for real before.
I think every school, every conference is doing it, at least the big ones, the ones that have been playing in the playoff the last few years and been successful. It's not just the SEC. And if people are worried that there's going to be like animosity in the locker room because someone gets a commercial deal and makes $50K more than the person next to them, like, I think those people don't really have an understanding about the way that this ecosystem has worked the last, 20 years, 30 years.
I don't know, Jess. I still think, like, if in any workplace you are working next to someone who is making 10 to 50 times more than you, there's going to be an insane amount of jealousy. But I think, like, to the larger point, Mike has been very good on this subject, which is to say that he's always constantly pointed out that in bigger cities, programs like Miami come under scrutiny in a way that in smaller cities where the entire town revolves around the college football team, it's a lot easier to get away with. I think probably at Miami, particularly after the amount of scandals that they've had, they have felt under a serious amount of scrutiny to the point where they probably are not competitive in terms of what they're paying players. And now they can be as a result of the fact that it's over the table.
Someone making more money than you at your workplace, like, yeah, that's the real world. Like, if these players want to play in the pros, that's going to happen. So better get used to it. Like, when I had a college job as an 18-year-old, people I worked with made more money than me. That's how it goes.
I wonder if this impacts the play on the field. Like, I wonder if guards all of a sudden start getting pissed off that they're not getting their just amount of money or something, and they're protecting quarterbacks, and then the quarterback's kind of like a dick to them, and they're like, you know what? Maybe you get hit next play. Maybe start treating us better.
Except De'Aaron King's going to be paying. He's going to have a slush fund for his offensive line.
Maybe he's not going to be paying him enough.
And
maybe he's going to get hit more.
And I think everyone's making great points, and I think this has been at play for decades already. The quarterback has been making more money than the guards, and the guards have known that the quarterbacks have been making more money at the big-time programs. And Jess is absolutely right on. All the schools are doing it. There is one conference that is doing it Wild West style, where everyone looks the other way because of my point that Chris echoed, which is economies run on the football program, and now you're not going to have the same sort of scrutiny. And while it's not the same, SEC is still going to have the most money to give these kids. They're going to run out of car dealerships in Alabama, is what I'm saying. And Miami has a certain number of options and a quality of life and family life for a lot of these top-end recruits that come out of South Florida that those schools can't make up the difference with just a simple dollar anymore.
Stugotz has popped into the Zoom at 6 a.m. Tahoe time. To Jessica's point, we've heard federal testimony, and I've said this a number of times, that Creighton, a starter at Creighton in basketball, is worth $100,000. That's the going rate, according to the FBI's wiretap situation. So imagine what a quarterback is at a major football program when a starting player at Creighton, the going rate is $100,000. And you just heard the list of things that De'Aaron King has in the works. Chris Cody, please find for me. This is after 4 days. It can sometimes be difficult to catch up to speed. Chris Whittingham was as unpolished at the start of what he began to say that involved a great deal of stumbling and staggering around in a way that made you howl with laughter. If you can find that for me, it is the lack of grace you do not expect ever from Fancy Lad after 4 days off. What am I to do with Stugotz here in this Zoom? It's dark in Tahoe. I can barely see him. You didn't tell people you were going early. Me and Mike didn't know until last night that you weren't here. I didn't think you were even going to be here today because of what hour it is. What am I supposed to do with our crowded show today with Stan, Amin, and Jemele to try and include you from Tahoe when you're not doing anything except checking in so you could put it on your expense account?
Dan, down by the lake, we live by a simple code, and that code is you just roll with it. And so if you use me, you use me. If you don't use me, you don't use me. I'm just going to roll with it. That's it, because down by the lake, Dan, that's the code we live by, okay?
Why are you telling people near the code that you live by that you're getting people guests today at 6 a.m. when no one's available until Wednesday or Thursday?
I'm not getting anyone at 6 a.m. Down by the lake, Dan, we live by a code.
You mentioned that,
you just go with the flow. And so whenever Travis Kelce wakes up, Patrick Mahomes, whenever they wake up, Wednesday, Thursday, they're playing right in the group behind us. I'm going to get those guys on. I'm going to get them on for you. I'm going to get them on for me. I'm going to get them on for the entire show. I'm going to get them on for the audience because that's what I do.
Billy,
Hi, Dan.
I wanted to ask you, I got jealous of the Atlanta Braves this weekend for a number of different reasons. I don't know whether Starling Marte, whether that's a real offer or not. I would ask for your opinion there. 3 years, $30 million is below market value. He says he wants to be here. It's the kind of offer you make when you want someone to refuse that offer, and then you can blame that person for refusing that offer, and you say, hey, that's the amount that was a good amount. What's wrong with $10 million a year for 3 years? You thought what when you saw the Marlins? It's one of the few players on that team that you trust. He's having a great year. He's been great for the Marlins. He's been their best player, their best position player. You made what of 3 years for $30 million? I'll get into why it is I was jealous of Atlanta in a second.
It seems a little low, right? But it's just a starting point. I mean, to your point, I think that it makes sense that this is coming out now, right? The trade deadline is at the end of the month, so you want to make the offer, and then if he says no and you get rid of him, you're like, well, we made him an offer and he didn't take it, so we had to get rid of him. So, I mean, hopefully this is the starting point. Hopefully he resigns, but at the same time, I'm going to pay him $20 million a year, right? Like $10 million is low, but while he's the best player on the team, don't handcuff yourself because of him for 3 years, I would think, right? And then you have the bad news that Sixto is going to be out the rest of the season. It seems like we're a little bit behind on this 5-year plan, let's say, in terms of things turning around all the way for the Marlins.
Well, we're behind by decades.
It's good that they're not overspending for a guy that's probably a number 2, 3, or like he's not a number 1 on a team, so you don't want to give him money as a number 1 now. So it does seem like a low offer, though.
But 3 years, $30 million is nothing in that sport.
Right, that's what I mean. It seems really low. But I'm glad. I'd rather have them offer too little and lose him than way overspend for him.
But do you believe the offer's a serious one, or do you believe the offer is just made to look like a serious one so you don't yell at them, is what I am asking you. Do you trust them? The reason I was jealous, Billy, is because I have seen over the last few decades when Atlanta was playing in Fulton County Stadium, I have seen what it is like to have your baseball team pass down through winning through generations. And so I was floored post-pandemic. I've gotten so used to baseball games being something that is just made for television, that there aren't crowds at many of these games, that they're just these things that are put on television because they need to satisfy the television contracts. And so what I was jealous of in Atlanta is they turn on all of their phones and it's a Friday night and they've got Ronald Acuna and Freddie Freeman, just a monstrous top of the order, and that place is swinging the way that I'm not used to baseball ever swinging on a Friday night. Like, it was happening in Atlanta on a Friday night, a regular season game with a totally full ballpark for the Marlins. And I've seen those big games that were played in the 90s between the Marlins and the Braves, and when the Marlins had that chance to stack successes on top of each other. After winning a couple of World Series, unlike the Braves, they weren't able to parlay it into anything that felt like that. I was stunned to see a baseball stadium on a Friday night filled and swaying with really happy people.
I wouldn't want to be a Braves fan. I hate the Braves. And that Ronald Acuna Jr. bubble boy over there that you can't throw inside because you start getting ejected if you throw too close to him. What a joke. What a joke. And Snitker, don't get me started on him. That guy's a clown. That shouldn't have been allowed, what happened the other day. And then you throw in, he can't do it. Did you see what happened when you throw up an in and you don't hit him? Did you see what happened there, Dan? Strikes out. That's what happens. He cowers in the big moments when you don't hit him. Leaned into it a little bit. Well, he didn't lean into it. I can't even go down that path. But I'm tired of these crybaby Braves and their Ronald Acuna Jr. and all his theatrics every time he gets hit. You know who's been hit as many times as he has? Brian Anderson. You know who's been hit one time less than him? Miguel Rojas. You don't hear any about that. All you hear is, oh, this Ronald Acuna Jr., oh, 2008. I'm so sick and tired of them. And don't tell me about the 1990 Marlins, okay? Because you know whose fault that was? Your friend H. Wayne Huizinga, who ruined baseball in South Florida. And I don't miss him. I'm just going to say it. I'm sorry. I know that that's a controversial take. I'm sorry. Thank you for nothing, Wayne Huizinga, and your empty promises of your blockbuster park and this and that. You ruined baseball down here, and I didn't forget it. And when you came back at that last game of the old stadium, I booed you while people were cheering for you. I booed you, and I would boo you again because you ruined Marlins and you ruined baseball down here. And if Jeffrey Lurie ever shows his face, I will boo him as well. I'm sick and tired of all these things from the past of the Marlins being brought back up, and this and that and this and that. No more of that.
I want Acuna so badly.
No, you don't. No, you don't. You don't want Acuna. I don't want him. I wouldn't take him. If they offered him for Starling Marte, I would say no, thank you. I wouldn't take him. I wouldn't take him.
Thank you, Billy.
You're an idiot.
Billy, where do you think the Braves would pitch Acuna if they traded him and had to face him? Where do you think they'd pitch him? Inside is where they'd pitch him because that's where you have to pitch him, or else he bats 800 against you.
And you know who'd be directing them to do that? Who would be doing it?
Who, Billy?
Brian Snitker, the crybaby that went running out on the field, throwing a little temper tantrum. Have you ever seen anything like that, Dan? Have you ever seen anything like that? The umpires got on the field. They said, go to first base. And then the manager comes out and he throws a temper tantrum, which is a horrible example for children. And I hope that no children were watching, because what you do when you don't get your way is you go out there and you start throwing a temper tantrum and you start screaming and stomping and you hold your nose and you start doing all that stuff, and then you get your way. And what does that do? That just rewards the bad behavior. So this Snicker is becoming a monster because of the fact that they just give him what he wants. And then Donnie Baseball, don't get me started on him, because I've had it with him too. Then going on and saying that he did a good job for his team. Get out of here, Donnie. You know what you should have done? You should have walked over and you should have punched Snicker right in the head for what he did. That's what you should have done. And then you should have pulled your entire team off the field and said, we're not playing this. This is a joke. This has become a joke. You can kick me out. You can kick my pitching coach out. You can kick my starting pitcher out. This entire team is leaving the field, and we will forfeit this game because this has become a mockery, and I'm not going to stand for this any longer.
Stugotz,
that's what Donnie Baseball should have done. But what did he do?
Mute your lake. Put it on the poll, Guillermo. Please stop yelling at me.
Because he's a horrible manager.
At Le Batard Show, put it on the poll.
Manager.
Is it a bad example for kids for a manager to throw a temper tantrum?
Yeah, the other manager should have punched him in the head.
Screaming and holding their nose and da. Jemele Hill, professional person, has been listening to all that. She has been waiting.
She agrees.
To get
Jemele,
on.
you agree, right?
We will be on with Jemele Hill in moments. Mike just got done saying of Stugotz, he is white privilege because he's joining us from Tahoe, where Amin, old Red Eye Amin, who just flew in from Phoenix. The finals are in Phoenix. He is about as geographically far from the finals as you can be, even though he lives in Phoenix while remaining in the contiguous United States. And we're all staring at Stugotz. And Amin and Jessica just pointed out that he looks like a government informant who's being interviewed by 60 Minutes. And Mike just said, but a really dumb one, that can't actually conceal his identity. And we've also got the future fun going during difficult subject matter of a leaf blower being present somewhere around him. That laughter.
He's really cranked it up this morning, man.
The laughter you hear in the background is Jemele Hill. So the story from the weekend is the soap opera. I'm going to give you some context here if you don't know what we're talking about. But you've got some infighting that's become public with a Rachel Nichols and Maria Taylor. Can we call it a kerfuffle? Has it gone to the level of kerfuffle? And it is a lot of soap opera. And I also think the thing that people are clucking about is there are about 6 or 7 things as interesting or more interesting that people aren't clucking about as it regards this New York Times story. But evidently, it would appear from the reporting that Rachel Nichols was protecting some real estate, and Maria Taylor got caught in the crossfire. Before I give you any of my opinions here, I want to hear from Jemele and Amin, because this has been a talking point, and you're not going to hear about it on ESPN because they don't talk about this stuff when it happens to them. The transparency is something we can demand when the shame belongs to others. And so Amin can talk about this because he knows the personalities, and Jemele can talk about it because she knows this subject matter and this terrain. So, Jemele, first of all, you read this story and thought what?
This is something that I knew about a year ago. I mean, because people have to realize that initially this was reported by Deadspin, but in a much different context than what we learned. But, of course, as somebody who once worked at ESPN and worked there for 12 years, naturally when the story first started, being reported, I heard from a lot of people who still work there, and in terms of, people venting and giving different context and perspectives about how they saw the situation. I think the situation is a lot more complicated than people have kind of weighed in and said. Yes, there is an element of race that is here, but there's also elements about our business that are quite common, unfortunately. And there's also elements of ambition, of territory, of a lot of things that are mixed in there. Bad management, I think that should be at the top of the list, because I think this is really a reflection of a culture that was created by ESPN's management. I mean, ultimately, while you certainly can have your criticisms of Rachel Nichols in terms of how she handled it, you can have your criticisms of Adam Mendelsohn, LeBron's advisor, and what he said in his comments. But to me, so much of this rests on the lap of the people in charge.
The leadership here is something that you see in the reporting. You're waiting for an answer as something festers for a year. And one of the things that I found as interesting as the story in the New York Times is days before. And I'm always telling you guys this, where your leaks come from. Look around for your leaks on the how and the where. In the New York Post, all of a sudden, Maria Taylor, who did nothing wrong here and is the only one who looks good in this situation, she gets smeared with Want Stephen A money as her contract comes up during the finals. So, Amin, what kind of problem do they have on their hands here?
Well, I mean, the contract situation obviously makes things more complicated because now anything they do is a referendum, right? And ESPN is an animal that is very sensitive to public criticism and to what people are talking about it. So they've painted themselves in a corner now because they've mismanaged the whole situation, like Jemele said, where, you know, how they treat Maria in this moment when her contract is up, which, by the way, is wow for the timing.
During the finals. Because of everything that happened with the pandemic. I know this has been weaponized by the Whitlocks and the shit-stained Clay Travis. I know it's been weaponized where they go after Maria Taylor, and this is, if it is somehow an orchestrated leak in the New York Times, it is quite the leverage move, and in terms of business, it would be smart business for a management team to do that. I don't know if that's true, but that's how it's being weaponized.
Yeah, and man, there's another layer to this that Jemele didn't mention is 3 letters, CAA. They rep both of these parties, and they're known for, you know, basically doing the Highlander thing. There can only be one. And I don't know if the general public knows or cares, really, because that's the other part of this. Who cares, right? Right now, we care because these are characters that we know, these are people we know, and it's a setting, an arena that we're all familiar with having been worked there. But the amount of influence that CAA has at ESPN and the growth of influence over the last decade is a direct driver for these types of conflicts to happen. And without that, I don't know if any of this comes to this sort of head, because what ESPN has done what I feel like over the last decade or so is a lot of kind of like trying to appease the letters as opposed to trying to take care of the talent who they're dealing with.
Jemele, he mentions that's the leadership to me. To me, the leadership here has been CAA's.
Well, this is where I'll slightly push back on what you said. I mean, is that, yeah, you're right. I mean, and as somebody who still receives representation from CAA, myself personally, let me be totally transparent with that, and have been since about 2013. So I guess I know every single party involved. But here's where I push back. I don't think this is there can only be one situation. I think the choice was made. And if we want to be just being fully honest here, is that the choice was made to have Maria as the host of Countdown. And we know the responsibilities and the duties that come with that. This is also an opportunity that clearly Rachel thought that she would like to be in line for and deserve, thus pitting them on a collision course. But nevertheless, the choice was made. And to me, with this, assuming this reporting is correct, that Rachel Nichols was promised to do the finals, that was the first mistake. Okay, because the reality is that is a duty reserved for the host. So my immediate question is, well, why did you even promise her to do that when you know you didn't pick her to be the host? So that's what I'm talking about with bad management. And maybe that, you know, I don't know, maybe that's something that CAA negotiated on her behalf. But the bottom line is they said yes. And that is a direct reflection of the systemic stuff that happens at ESPN. If you're going to give Maria the hosting job, give her the hosting job, which means every component. And if that means you have to have a tough conversation with somebody, then you do. Because that's what you get paid to do as a manager. They certainly don't have problems having tough conversations with a lot of people around there, right? And so this is what I'm talking about, where the additional layer of not just bad management, but also sometimes being unable to tell people no. I mean, that's pretty much it. And I think the insulting part, certainly for Black women, for Black people watching this play out is we get told 1,000 times a day in various ways that the only reason that we got our jobs is because we're a diversity hire. Now, unpacking the layers of what Rachel said is that, do you think that ESPN considered and factored in the fact that, okay, here we have a primarily Black sport. We have a very talented hostess, a very talented on-air talent in Maria Taylor. And this is representative of what the league looks like. To me, there's no fault in considering that as part of your choice and reason to have her be the host. Because it's not about her ability. It's also about that fact that you want to have a product that actually reflects the league that you cover. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. If it is, we can argue about it, whatever. But that being said, is that there's still that undercurrent of the only reason she's there is because of that. And maybe I don't think Rachel was saying that explicitly, but that undercurrent was there. And that is the part that, frankly, why some of her colleagues are probably looking at her a particular way right now, especially some of her Black colleagues, because that's how it felt. And it's a sensitive nerve for us because we get told that all the time. And let me just also say, I've known Rachel for many years. I have never had a negative interaction with Rachel Nichols. She has always treated me well, but that doesn't mean my experience with her is not the blanket of who she is as a person. And I don't say that trying to go after her or whatever, but how somebody deals with you, they could deal with 10 other people in 10 totally different ways. Right. And so I'm not going to use my experience to say that, this proves without a doubt that Rachel Nichols is and possibly could never have done something shady. I don't know that because I don't know her that well to say what she would or wouldn't do.
So I guess my thing is, first of all, you're right. Beyond Maria, being representative of the sport that she covers, she's awesome at her job.
Correct.
She's like,
if you could get both, win-win.
Win-win, exactly.
Right.
So to me, it's not a question about her efficacy or even here's the part. This is the part where I was trying to say on Twitter, but it never comes across. People assume that ESPN is this extremely well-run company and that the logic that Jemele just laid out there, like this is a Black sport. You want, the faces that cover the sport to be somewhat in line with that. And so we've got someone who's awesome at her job and she's Black and she has a rapport with the people with it. It's a great choice. But the problem is we know that's not how ESPN makes decisions, right? Like all that is true. And also ESPN doesn't make decisions like that. They oh my God, they're coming for us. Put somebody Black out there. Yeah. And you know this, and we all know this because we saw, Dan, how many times over the years, topics that we wanted to touch, and we get a call from the babysitter. Don't do that. Stay away from that. Right? And the moment last summer happened, all of a sudden, everyone has free reign to talk in very specific terms about white supremacy, about how Jemele was wronged because everything she said was true and she caught the sword for it. And then 3 years later, we're all allowed to say it on ESPN air, on every platform, and no one says a word. Do you think ESPN made a strategic, the numbers are No, they're panicking. They panicked and they threw whatever they thought would stop the fire.
And it led pretty directly to Maria Taylor's rise at the company and her profile at the company and her voice at the company and her voice behind the scenes. Jemele, what kind of problem in-house do they have now? That was uncomfortable for me to watch Rachel Nichols give 10 seconds of apology, and then Kendrick Perkins and Richard Jefferson went 2 minutes on the subject of race where she has to sit out the conversation that was caused by what she was calling in the report spy video from a hotel.
They have a massive problem on their hands, but it's not a massive problem that started with Rachel Nichols and Maria Taylor. It's what Amin was talking about, is that when you are constantly reacting to public criticism or to the moment, as opposed to having structural things in place where you address these things, that's why you wind up looking sloppy and crazy before the rest of the world. And, thinking about, my situation is like they were reacting to a moment then. That moment said that people didn't want to hear any political talk, any racial talk, any social justice talk. Not that that was something Mike and I were doing every day on SportsCenter. We weren't. They let a false narrative persist about our show that people just kind of ran away with. They let the idiots in the room control the conversation. People like Clay Travis. That's what happened. And because they allowed those people to direct their course of action, they panicked. And suddenly they were very intentional about the things that they were doing in our show. They wanted black faces. They didn't want necessarily black voices. And that's how it came off, right? And so because of that, ultimately, we wound up paying the price. Yep. I mean, sure, there were things that Mike and I could have done differently on SportsCenter with just getting our show together, but we never got that time because they were too busy responding to conservative media. And so whenever you keep doing that, that's how you wind up with sloppy situations. And it shouldn't have taken a George Floyd for ESPN to allow commentators and people like Dan and me and you and me to discuss racism in this country. That doesn't mean that we would discuss it every day or every hour, but just within the context that seems appropriate, which is all any of us asked to do. Nobody came to work every day at ESPN and said, you know what I want to talk about today? Immigration reform. Nobody did that shit. So it's like, they were responding to people who didn't even watch ESPN. Right. And so now this is just another form of that problem where they have allowed a situation between these two women to completely fester. Nobody has stepped in and said, okay, we need to figure out something. And now they have a massive problem on their hand because they have been exposed in a way that ESPN is not comfortable being exposed. And I'll just say this quickly before we, continue the discussion. Watching, Rachel and Perk and Richard Jefferson address this very uncomfortably on the jump is something that unfortunately ESPN also has a track record of, is like acknowledging but not really addressing. They knew they couldn't put her on TV yesterday and her not saying anything. And to me, either you're going to put her on there and allow her to really dive into it, or you just leave it alone. And what wound up happening is you put everybody that was on air in a bad position. And now you have the optics of having Kendrick Perkins and Richard Jefferson having to defend Rachel Nichols over a situation they didn't cause, create, and have nothing to do with. So either have her address the camera by herself and leave the other two out of it, or just don't even do it. Because what people saw yesterday could not possibly have covered many of the things that have come up in the last 3 days.
So, Jemele, I love that point because that's one of those things where I'm watching and I'm like, oh, I know exactly what happened, right? We have to address it, right? Because you can't just not talk about it. So, but we're not going to do a whole show. We'll do one segment. All right, Rachel talk. But wait a second. If Rachel talks and you've got two black people there and they don't get to chime in, well, how's that going to look?
Well, let's get a black woman. How about Maria Taylor? No.
Oops.
Yeah. Can't do that. And
no. And then even I remember the day after those tweets I had about Trump exploded, and or the day of. I mean, the conversations, all that went on. Yes, I'm one of those people who's saving it for the memoir. Everything that happened, I'm being real. I'm saving it for the memoir. But they wouldn't let me address it at all. And I'm like, the entire world is talking about this right now, and they wanted no parts of it. And we made a couple jokes about it, but that was like it. And so to see it come full circle into this, I was like, oh, well, this is interesting.
also interesting because I want to get in point by point to the things that I found as interesting as the soap opera elements that got everyone clucking. But when you guys talk about reacting to the reaction, it's not just that. It's reacting to the reaction from people who don't look like us. It's not reacting to the reaction because you've got leadership that is a bunch of women people are listening to or a bunch of black dudes people are listening to. It's not just reaction to the reaction. It's those decisions are not being made by either the people in the center of the controversy or the people above them of color who might have a different perspective, because none of those people are in power. Not real power.
No. Go ahead, Jemele.
No, I was just gonna say, like, ESPN has like such a pretty team picture. I always thought that because I mean they have the most diversity when you look at on air talent. I mean, ESPN, they have the power, they have a lot of the jobs, they have the on air talent. Where it's like if you just watch ESPN for a day, you would think like it's a pretty diverse workplace. Yeah, and then you start peeling some layers back. I was like, nah, you need to walk around ESPN's campus and look in some of those C-suite offices, and it's a completely different picture. And of course, I mean, they do have, people who are, they do have people of color who are there at ESPN, some of which are in high roles. But I often wonder, especially in situations like this, are those people empowered to actually give the company direction in moments like this, or even beyond moments like this? Are they empowered, period? And I think to be decided would be my best answer.
Jemele, I think when it comes to diversity at ESPN on air, on the talent, it is a box that is usually checked off by, let's just get a former athlete, right? And by the way, that's not an ESPN specific problem, because I saw it working in the front offices in the NBA. If you're white, you can be anything you want in this organization, right? Where'd you go to school? You can have any background. If you're black, where'd you play? Right? That's how they check the diversity box. We'll just get the former athletes. That's where we get our diversity. But then I can have gone to MIT or I've gone to Columbia or whatever and had an academic background in life, or even worked somewhere, some unrelated industry, and come right in here and be those things. And so there's that element. And then when you talk about on the management side, Jemele, you and I have a mutual friend. I'm not going to say their name, who is a person who is, let's just say, diverse, right? Who came in and had to watch people less qualified meet and then overtake their status within the company. And then when things got hot for the company, they gave this person a kind of like a promotion, a nice title.
Oh, I know exactly who you're talking about too.
I know.
I
don't want to say their name because that the point isn't about them. The point is that's what Jemele's talking about. We say it looks diverse, but is it really diverse if these people don't have a say, and as things are happening aren't consulted and are seeing people be promoted over them? This is the company we're talking about. So again, it's not about Maria. It's never been about Maria, because Maria is deserving. Maria is awesome at her job. But stop acting like this company is a rational company that does things the right way. That thought process that Jemele outlined at the beginning, which is, hey, it would be really good if we had that. No, they don't do it like that. They do it when they're pressured and because they're very sensitive to criticism.
Are you allowed to publicly, I know Steven Jackson got dragged on this yesterday, are you allowed to publicly also feel bad for Rachel Nichols while wincing at the video? I know a lot of people want this to be punitive. I know a lot of people are wondering, Paul Pierce is let go because he's doing something in his home that he's putting on Instagram, and there are no consequences here except to a producer, a low-level producer is the only one who endured consequences. You know Rachel. You've worked with Rachel. Rachel has been good. We all like Rachel. Rachel, you shouldn't hit her with privilege because she worked her ass off over all sorts of obstacles to get to where she is. But are you allowed? I think the public scorn is enough. I think that's unpleasant enough.
I'm going to say this. I'm allowed to do whatever the hell I want. I'm allowed to do whatever the hell I want. And Jemele, I know at the beginning you said you know Rachel, but you don't know her that well. I know Rachel that well. And I'm of the mind that my friends, I stand up for my friends. When my friends are being misunderstood, I stand up for them. It's a stance that's got me in trouble at work. It's a stance that got me in trouble at home. It's a stance that doesn't provide a whole lot of material value for me other than my peace of mind at night. That I know when my friends get in trouble, I stand up for them. Just like I stood up for Jemele, just like I stood up for Mark Stein. I stand up for my friends.
Sorry, that's my. I'm in a hotel and everybody's.
but
I just had to punctuate Amin's beautiful speech with that.
The lawyers are calling.
Get him up there.
What are you doing? You're setting fire to everything. What are you doing? Save it for the memoir.
I think one of the things that we need to talk about is the concept of privacy, right?
Once we get the gotcha, though, the privacy, it just vanishes.
But here's the thing. I actually wrote this down because it staggered me that this was the excerpt here. It is not clear why her camera was on, but most people at ESPN believe that Nichols, using new technology during a pandemic, did not turn it off properly. It was effectively the remote pandemic version of a hot mic incident. Bullshit. Rachel knows how to use it. It's the TVU app. We've all used it before the pandemic on remotes. They give you a little iPhone. Now it's an iPad, but they used to give you an iPhone and a tripod, and you hook it up and you use it.
I found that part fascinating, that once we got the gotcha, everyone stopped caring about, man, none of you would have liked this particular thing to happen to you and spread without anybody being concerned about the privacy, especially at a company where Erin Andrews was in a hotel room and we went through the whole private video thing.
Well, I mean, I guess my question to you, Amin, is like, are you asserting that something nefarious happened? Like,
you're goddamn right I am. Because I've used the TVU app. I've had the conversations with the people in transmissions about like, not ready to go yet, whatever. It's like, all right, it's all good. We can flick it on. Mm-hmm. They have the control to turn it off and on over there. If your iPad is up, they have you are offline, they can go, no, boop, you're online. Imagine your Zoom meeting and you left your Zoom meeting and they said, no, you don't, come back right here. They can do that, right? That exists. And because it's not the 20s or whatever, I don't know who came in here. People log in. There's digital fingerprints everywhere. We can at least narrow it down to who was working between those hours. They had access to this thing. And I'm sorry, we talk about management and leadership. The moment that thing happens, regardless of what Rachel says, Rachel could have gone full Trump, and we would have dealt with that later for Rachel. But also, I'm lining up everybody. If someone doesn't step up, you're all getting fired. Everyone who worked that ship. Because the reality is you cannot have violations of privacy happen like that. And when that story broke last year, and I'm kind of following up with Rachel and other people, and I'm realizing, it's not a priority at all for the company to catch the culprit. They kind of, well, what are we going to do? We don't know how. Maybe she didn't know how to use the... That's ridiculous. It's cowardice. And by the way, it's illegal. Like, forget about morality and all that. It's illegal for that person to do what they did, and then to peddle it is another level. And you mentioned Kayla Johnson getting suspended, right? That's also a very ESPN move, right? Something awful happens. Let me find the smallest person in the room and pick on them.
And I guess that's why I wanted some clarification, because I know that Kayla ultimately played the penalty. And to me, what made that even worse is not only do you find the smallest person, but somebody who probably cannot afford to go 2 weeks without making money. Right. And so it's just very alarming that she would be the sacrificial lamb and all that. And thankfully, she's moved on to bigger and better. Yep. But anybody who's worked with Kayla, and I've worked with her, I had the pleasure of working with her a few times. She's bright, she's talented, she's smart, she's a lot of things. And, I know people wondered, like, well, and I mean, you know this, is like, there is a level of solidarity, especially that Black people in this business have and in that building have. Mm-hmm. And if I hear somebody that is, talking badly about somebody that I consider to be a friend, I'm going to let them know. And particularly in this situation, so I know a lot of people want to take aim at Kayla for relaying the information. I'm like, listen, I would do the same thing. I'd be like, yo, keep your head on the swivel, because this is what I hear.
For those of you who do not know, the report in the New York Times, Kayla Johnson, she told HR that she sent the video to Taylor. She was suspended for 2 weeks without pay. The reporting of the New York Times is that she then got lesser jobs and eventually left the company.
Yep, and that's a very ESPN move. And to be clear, I know someone said, wait a second, you just said let's line up the 12 people who are available and threaten to fire them all. That's different. Someone in that group is responsible for this being created. What Kayla did was what one of many people did, A, in terms of sharing it, and B, what Jemele just said. Kayla works with Maria on multiple shows, is very close with her, and heard something that she felt was disparaging about her friend. Absolutely, she's going to share it incident. And I don't have
I assume company policy is you're supposed to go to HR in that circumstance. I do understand why a black woman at a place where black women feel like they're not heard and they can't get ahead would go straight to the black woman and say, did you see this? That's pretty human. That's the human in human resources. Sometimes human resources is about the resources and not about the humans.
Right. Like the idea that like I would tell HR, first of all, Kayla wasn't patient zero in terms of like the first person to share it once it came to her. She was one of many. Second of all, the idea that like something would happen. Let's say something happened here at Metal Art, and I would not tell the person it happened to. I would go tell HR and then let that person live in blissful ignorance. Like, I'm sorry. Again, this goes back to I can't sleep at night like that. I look after my friends. I tell them I would do exactly what Kayla did.
Yeah, I mean, Dan was asking about whether or not, I feel bad for Rachel. And to be perfectly honest, I don't know what I feel, really, and because I think that's okay, too, to not know, how you feel. And
it's not okay. You know this, Jemele, in the argument.
Oh, yeah,
I
got to have a hot take.
Like,
that's right.
No, I love that you, of course. This has got so many layers on it. Yeah. And I'm pleased to hear you admit that because it's not an easy admission, but I think it's the honest admission.
Yeah, I mean, it's as honest as I can be. Like, it's like I don't know really how to feel about it. Is that I don't have a close enough relationship with Rachel to be out here defending her and to say exactly what's in her character, even though, again, having known her for as many years as I have, and having had like good conversations with her, that's the extent of it. So I'm not going to sit up here and pretend like Rachel and I are besties, like we aren't, right? And so even though I wouldn't consider us friends, I would consider us friendly. And so not to the point where I feel like I need to put on a cape. To be quite honest, It's like, no, I don't really feel the need to do that. Now, do I feel like she should be stoned to death and burned at the stake as many people on Twitter and social media want her to be? No, I mean, I don't think that's really the appropriate response in many situations and cases. But ultimately, I guess as somebody who spent 12 years being a Black woman in this industry, knowing the inside of what this feels like. I mean, every job with the exception of maybe one or two jobs I've had in this business over the course of my 20-year career, there were a lot of jobs that people said I didn't deserve to have, or I'm only there. I remember when I became a sports columnist in Orlando when I was 28 years old. I was the only Black female sports columnist in North America. Notice I didn't say America. I was the only Black female sports columnist.
Canada and Mexico.
Yes, Mexico and Canada was not.
I'm gonna guess South America too, perhaps, and you don't even know it.
Yes, I think it's fair to say, but based off a survey that was done, I was 1 out of 405 at a daily newspaper, and the number of people when I got that job, and keep in mind, I was just the third columnist at the Sentinel. I wasn't in first chair and I wasn't even second chair. I had 2 days a week that I wrote. And one of those days, my column appeared on the inside of the sports section, not even out front. So this is truly in column writing, an entry level position. And I don't want to make it seem like it was some angry mob, but of course I heard all the whispers of people telling me I didn't deserve it. And I'm like, wow, I can't even be third? Like, really? I don't deserve that. It was the same when I got to ESPN, when I made the jump from Orlando to ESPN. I remember a very untimely story came out about my salary. Sounds familiar, right? That said that it was reported that I was making $200,000 a year moving to the Orlando Sentinel, which I wasn't, by the way. And suddenly it was, not only does she not deserve this job, they paying this heifer what? Like, that's what it was. And so I have gone through this so many times in my career. Sports Center, his and hers, like all the time. And so at some point, there's an exhaustion level for me as a Black woman that why is it every job that we get, we just don't deserve? If they loved us that much, wouldn't you see more of us? Yeah. Clearly, we're not what's hot in the street because it's not a whole lot of us out here.
Bomani says it all the time, and Bomani's got it plenty tough as being an opinionated, won't stand down Black man having opinions throughout sports. He says it all the time. Jemele had it harder than any of us by leaps and bounds, what she had to overcome. And I want to talk to her about about the layers of this story that involve gender and race, but I also need to point out, because we're live on YouTube and Jemele and Amin have a sense of humor, and we have not done enough laughing around this. Stugotz had to move his car, and so even though Stugotz's every response to conversations like this is it's an important conversation, and I'm glad we're having it, it looks, the optics of this are white privilege in Tahoe just left the conversation entirely, bored by everything that Amin and Jemele were talking about, and here he is returned.
I'm back.
You know what, Stugotz? I'm black. I don't get to leave the conversation.
What happened?
Jemele, how is this story different if it's not a white woman and a black woman? If it's two men being ambitious? If it's not the racial element? How is this story different?
Well, I think that I wonder, granted, the other salacious element we have to include is the fact that it's a recorded conversation. So I think that is ultimately what has amped this up to another level. With the races, if they were, different or transposed, or if this were two black women or just two white women, then I think that some of this might have been reported, but not nearly with the degree. I don't think it reaches and rises to the level that we've seen it. And oh, by the way, and that was something that I hinted to in my kind of initial comments, is that this is quite common in our industry, right? Is that people get promised things in contracts. All of us, when we're at the negotiating table, we do our damnedest to get every dollar, every cent, every assignment. That is what we do. People are very territorial over what they cover. It often creates conflicts with others. And, sometimes there have been situations that I've known about at ESPN that have occurred that have reached this level, where you have two people not talking to each other, where you have people having to pick sides, where you have to have sit downs. Like, I have witnessed this many times at ESPN. So as ugly as this may seem on the outside to people, it's really common. And I'll say this, like that part, I think, is also part of the reaction, particularly that you may have seen from women, from black women in particular, is that we do often hear, from white women that will say like, oh, we're all here for, diversity and moving up and all this. And then when it becomes a competitive situation, all that allyship goes out the window, right? And yeah, you're allowed to be competitive in your job, but I do think there's a way that you can be competitive without having to crush everything in your path. And so I think that there was definitely a lot of this situation sprung forward, a lot of those conversations as well.
So that's the question I wanted to ask everybody, right? Because everyone, pointed out to me, oh, yeah, because she saw her as a threat or whatever. That's, that shows you how not down for the cause she is, Rachel, in this, what they're referring to. And I said, well, this isn't the stereotypical, generic white person is angry that black person got a great position that white person had no chance of getting, right? A lot of people I can't believe Jemele Hill got, well, was it ever down to you and Jemele Hill? No? Then shut up. Like, it has nothing to do with you. In this case, it was something that was actually taken away from Rachel based on, in that conversation, her contract. She was promised this and she wasn't getting it. There's not a person in this industry who has something taken out of their contract who isn't gonna fight for that shit. They don't give a damn about supporting anything. Like, it's in many ways, it's the Liam Neeson thing, right? Yes, women should absolutely get paid more. Should we take some of the money that we promised you? Hell no. That's my money. But you guys can figure it out somewhere else. That is the most natural human reaction. And what Rachel said had nothing to do with, like, Maria's not capable, Maria's not qualified. It's just, you're not going to take something that's mine, right? Out of all the jobs here, all the jobs that are held by white men, you're gonna pick mine after all the shit I went through? And Rachel's been through a lot of shit too at that company that I'm not gonna go into and discuss. And that brings me to the point that I wanted to get about when we're talking about privacy, which is privacy. And I wrote this down because I wanted to get it right. Privacy is also about the freedom to express a sentiment without worrying about filtering or messaging, right? The conversations that we have in private, not to say that they are can be wildly different. Like, hi, I love potato chips. And then in private, goddamn, potato chips are the worst thing ever, right? But when I speak publicly, if I am a sponsor, an endorser of Lay's potato chips, I say potato chips are my favorite snack. And then behind closed doors, I might say, you know what? Sometimes the salt irritates me. Or, you know what? Sometimes I just can't have another potato chip. I got to get a couple weeks off. I could never say that publicly because that would ruin kind of the endorsement. And also, people don't have room for nuance in that. So when we speak publicly, it's curated on some level. When I speak privately, I might exaggerate. I might, take away some of the nuance because you get it. The receiver, in this case, is someone I'm talking to in private. They get what I'm trying to say. So people are taking what Rachel said, which, by the way, if you listen to it and read through it, she never throws Maria under the bus in any way. She's just talking about her particular territory, her real estate that's been taken away from her. And this is one of the things, she even talks about white conservative male Trump voters in power at ESPN who are giving a hard time. But the one thing I want to say here is, so there's this quote from Rachel, and then afterwards, the writer says, multiple black ESPN employees said they told one another after hearing the conversation that it confirmed their suspicions that outwardly supportive white people talk differently behind closed doors. That had nothing to do with Rachel, though. That has nothing to do with Rachel. Like, if you have this belief about, which I believe, yes, there are white people who are like, yeah, I love it, and then, these black people, right? But that's not what Rachel did. And that's not what Rachel's about. And I guess that comes into me, quote unquote, being a cape in this scenario is that I know her. And I'm not going to let people say that's the type of person she is. But it all comes back to that tenet of privacy, is that I don't have to worry about wording it just the right way.
I was stunned. I was stunned that everyone, once they had the gotcha, didn't care about the privacy at all. Jessica, what do you got here?
I just think, to Amin's first point, this is part of the problem that is baked into the system, that you have two really talented women competing for one spot. There can only be one spot for a talented woman on this broadcast. We let the men have numerous spots on the broadcast, but Maria and Rachel now have to fight for the scraps because that's how it works. You can only have one woman on the show.
There's another element to this, by the way, which is the Game of Thrones of ESPN, particularly on the NBA side. The power struggle. The moment I cackled, ladies and gentlemen, I cackled out loud reading this article, was the quote that Adrian Wojnarowski called someone else a bad teammate. Are you, can I cuss? I don't know.
You've already done that.
Are you shitting me? This guy's going to call someone a bad teammate? For real? For real? Do we want to talk about the black careers that he put a foot on because he was threatened by? Do we want to talk about that? Do you want to talk about the newsbreakers with an S of diverse backgrounds who have rapport with players that Adrian doesn't have, that he saw as threatening because his sources are all front office people and assistant coaches trying to move up and maybe a video coordinator who's trying to get a better job somewhere else. But he can't talk to LeBron and he can't talk to Chris Paul or Damian Lillard or some of these other guys. He doesn't have that rapport with them. So what he does is he steps on them. And he's stepping on, and beyond that particular angle, he steps on a lot of people over there. He steps on a lot of people over there, right? When you see a byline that says, as reported by Adrian Wojnarowski and fill in the blank, that's the old, put my name on it and put it out there.
Well, he's running everything over there. He is running most of basketball over there.
And so,
but to be fair to me, if we gonna go there,
mm-hmm.
and that's part of my concern is there. When I was there was a perception that Rachel was the same way.
Rachel's putting her name on people's stories?
No, not that part.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. That when it came to the NBA, that she was ruthless. That was the perception.
But men can be ruthless, Jemele.
I'm not here to criticize it, but I'm just saying that was the same perception that she had.
I'm not gonna deny what you said. I haven't heard that, but again, I'm not plugged in the same way.
But Jemele, you know there are a lot of people fighting for space here, and this is the vanity business.
That doesn't make her unique, and that doesn't make her like. I'm sure Adam Schefter is the same way.
Sure,
I'm sure like that's the nature of kind of the job.
But the part where someone pipes in, you're a bad teammate. You're being a bad teammate. Really? Come on, man. Give me a break. Particularly when it comes to the element of race in this. If we're going to inject that race in there, give me a break.
More to the point, Jemele, as it relates to Rachel, how difficult is it going to be for her to do that job? You are none of these one thing that ends up sticking to people. Rachel Nichols is more than the defining thing of the moment here that becomes just not multidimensional enough. As the poor actress Rachel Nichols from, what is that, Criminal Minds, wakes up in the morning and she's like, man, sports are toxic. She wakes up in the morning because she's got the same name and people are just burying her. How difficult is it going to be in this sport to have this attached to you if people don't want to do the nuance on this one?
I would imagine it would be difficult. I mean, I guess if you're a player, then you have to weigh her work for the last, decades or so against what you just read, and people are going to have the optics of it look bad because you have a white woman and a black woman, and all that. So that's going to be something that she'll have to deal with, but also in the building. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of her black colleagues who are suspicious right now, who are wondering right now about who she is as a person, even if they've worked with her. They're wondering like, oh, does she have something different to say, kind of when they're not around. And so I think that's part of it. And also what becomes of her career at ESPN, because I have seen them in the past when people get into controversial situations, they may not outwardly punish them, whereas there may not be a suspension. There may not be, something that happens that's visible, but slowly they diminish them to the point where they just don't want to be there anymore.
Have you seen that?
Really?
I've kind of seen that happen. I mean, I'm sure no one on this stream has any knowledge of that whatsoever.
Wait a minute. So what happens? So you lose part of your show and you end up on ESPN Plus? Like, what hypotheticals are it that you speak of here?
Just saying, just throwing it. I mean, it's called the death
so you
by
have a
1,000 paper cut
situation where you
strategy.
go see the president of the company in New York and then the show starts shrinking. Really?
Take an hour off, right?
Yeah, just thinking, not that you guys would know anything about that, but it happens at ESPN.
I want to read you a couple of quotes here. We've got Stan Van Gundy waiting to get into the show, but one of the things, I think I've got a list of 6 or 7 of them here, but I have not heard, never mind a former ESPN employee, an employee while they're at ESPN say, if you need to give her more things to do because you're feeling pressure about your crappy long-time record on diversity, which, by the way, I know personally from the female side of it. And then later in the quote, those same people who are like generally white conservative male Trump voters is part of the reason I've had a hard time at ESPN. That feels a little systemic in a way that should probably be at the forefront of this soap opera. Like, I mean, you've got a voice, a star voice in that sport saying that. Like, for all the gotcha, why does that gotcha get sort of missed on this one as we go after the 2 principal stars? And we're sort of missing. When have you heard a voice say that's at the company?
Well, privately, I've heard
all the time.
said. Yeah, I've heard it said a lot. I mean, I think I probably said it myself a few times. Exactly. But this is why as we parse out the responsibility of this is why I said ultimately a lot of this is on management and leadership. And reading that story, it's hard not to look at this and say, what the hell is going on there, right? And it's not things that are new to any of us because we have either witnessed it, experienced it, seen it during our time at ESPN. But that's the thing that they have to address that's much harder to address. And you can't always address it by putting somebody on a show, making somebody a host, hiring a former player. Like, it's not going to be addressed that way because it's baked into the core system of how they do things. And that requires a lot of work, commitment, and it requires the things that typically people aren't willing to do. They just don't want to say that because it's impolitic to say. It is, they know they can't, quote unquote, get away with it. But the truth is, that's exactly why I tweeted when all of this was kind of going down. It's like I said last summer, all those companies putting out these "we care about Black people" statements, Black Lives Matter, they all did it last year in the wake of everything that was happening in this country. Don't pay attention to what they say, pay attention to what they do. That tells the story.
What she does is important. Jemele, you've just signed. I haven't told people. Stan Van Gundy's going to be here in a second. But what do I need to tell people in general about where they can find you? Because you're doing the most important work of your career here with Spotify to empower and give voices to Black women because of your pioneering path. So what do people need to know about where to find you, how? And thank you for the time you spent with us here today.
Always a pleasure to have a nuanced conversation, Dan. You don't get a lot of those in our business sometimes. But no, I'm really proud of this, developing this network with Spotify for Black women, about Black women, using Black female talent, behind the scenes Black women, because I think, there is a tendency in this country to overlook, frankly, ignore and dismiss, the nuance of Black women. And it's all great when everybody's running to us to save the democracy, i.e. Stacey Abrams. But then after all that whole yes girl and Black girl magic shit goes away, then, what is left? Then people don't want to hear from us. And then we're not as powerful. We're not a voice unless we're saving somebody else. So this to me is not just my tribute and my love letter to Black women, but something that I want to be a lasting legacy related to opportunity and empowerment and amplification. So we're building this thing up from the ground, and we're, of course, beginning to canvas and look at talent and figure out, just kind of the direction we want to take things in year one. But feeling really good about it. And I think this is going to be something really, really special.
Appreciate the strength and the honesty, Jemele. Thank you for giving us your time today. I know you're busy.
All right, appreciate it.
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugotz podcast.
Like a good pontoon on a lake, it's a lot slower than like a jet boat. You don't need all the, jet skiing, all the fast moving.
All the boat snobs out there look down on pontoons. Yeah, I love a good pontoon.
That's not true.
No, the boat. Like, you're not a boat snob, Stan. Like, I think,
but mine can move too now. I mean, I can go 50-55 on my pontoon.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
your pontoon can scoot.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I'm not the fastest thing out there, but I'm not slowing down traffic either. So,
you ever get a little wakeboarding in, Stan?
No, that ain't me. That ain't me. No, I'm going to be in the boat. Yeah, unless I get out to swim. That's about as risky as it gets.
Swimming in a lake is very dangerous.
Yeah, it can be.
I like to see what's in the water.
Yeah, we had one time Lake Monroe up here in Sanford. We'd been out all day on the boat, and we decided to jump in, my wife and I. My son from the boat's pointing, he goes, gator? And I thought he was bullshitting me, but 10 feet away, we saw, it wasn't very big, gator, and we quickly and quietly got back on the boat. So
I'm more worried about like all the bacteria and like amoebas and stuff like that like could slowly sneak in like through my nose and eat my brain and kill me.
Well, the lake we live on is a small lake, and in those they tell you here, not to swim because it's so shallow and the water gets so warm that that's exactly what happens. Yeah. So we don't go here, but when we're out in like you get up to like Lake Beresford, it's deep enough and cold enough that it's you're not going to have that problem.
Now I'm thinking, would I really want to know everything that's in the water, though, if I was going to go in the lake? Like, I'd probably like the mystery better. Before, my thinking is I like it, to be clear so I can see there's nothing around. But if there's going to be something around, let me not see it.
Yeah, unless it's like a gator or if you're in the ocean, a shark or something, that you'd want to know. So
Look at that cherubic face. Look at that mustache. Look at the mustache.
We back
Get out of here. Yes.
Yeah. Look at that mustache.
Look at that glorious mustache. Let's play some.
I don't know about glorious, but and I did think this morning. I'm going on Le Batard and Friends. Should I shave? And I said, no, absolutely
no.
not.
You made news from STUpodity from your bed. You're talking about being on different pages with New Orleans. You made news while laying on a bed on STUpodity, exactly the way you should glide into retirement, Van Gundy. Let this be your final basketball job. Spend the rest of the way with us. Let's laugh with Stan Van Gundy here by playing some of this baseball sound, not the newest sound. You remember, surely, Stan, you have heard the sound, the sports sound, and all sports sounds from inside. This was at the beginning of the pandemic, I think. And how long? Was it a long time before the pandemic? I just associate this sound with an empty ballpark. And Brenneman has gotten in trouble and is apologizing for hot mic conversation that was, offensive to gay people.
This happened in last August, so we're approaching the 1-year anniversary.
Okay.
I remember it.
All right, so here is that sound, because you're not going to believe how it is. We've just recently gotten an update.
Castellanos to lead things off. Jim Day's going to be taking us the rest of the way through this game as Holland takes over on the mound. I made a comment earlier tonight that I guess went out over the air that I am deeply ashamed of. If I have hurt anyone out there, I can't tell you how much I say from the bottom of my heart. I'm so very, very sorry. I pride myself and think of myself as a man of faith. As there's a drive in a deep left field by Castellanos, it will be a home run. And so that'll make it a 4-0 ball game. I don't know if I'm going to be putting on this headset again.
It's damn near impossible to make that subject matter funny. And afterward, Brockmeyer and Hank Azaria, they were mad that they didn't come up with something like that. What is the context I need for this newest sound, somehow involving, again, Castellanos, Bally Sports, Midwest? Is this a Royals game and they're eulogizing somebody?
It was a Royals game again. Castellanos hits a ball to the exact same spot. This is during an on-air eulogy.
Well, we're going to tell you about a great man, and it's a loss for the Royals family. This is George Gorman, who passed away at the age of 96. He served our country in World War II. He went to the University of Kansas, and so did his son, Pat Gorman, who's been working for the Royals in the clubhouse for 26 years. Wow. And that was Pat's father. But that's a great life, 96 years. And Pat, just like his dad, went to KU. He also went to Bishop Ward High School. There's a drive into deep left center field, and there's never a great time to eulogize someone during the broadcast.
Look at Stan. Like, that's as happy as I've seen him in a year.
How can that happen twice?
I mean, put it on the poll, Guillermo. George, 96-year-old George. That was a good run, no? That was a good run. I think that's how George would have wanted to go out. That's how he would have wanted to be eulogized. I feel like I can say that without knowing anything else about 96-year-old George.
All I know is if you're playing against Cincinnati and you've got bad news to break on the air, do not do it when Castellanos is at the plate.
Castellanos has a flair for the dramatic. He apparently hit his first major league home run the day Osama bin Laden was assassinated.
There you go.
This guy, we need to build a statue to Castellanos. He's like an American landmark. What are the chances of that happening again, where you get that just incredibly awkward sound of eulogizing someone and then the baseball broadcaster just having to remain sacred to the script of, I'm always responsible for calling the home run. No matter what I'm talking about, I have to call the home run.
The funniest part is, as he's saying there's never a good time for a eulogy, I imagine that in that moment, as the home runs happen, like, God damn it, happened again. Like he's thinking of that other call.
Is it Castellanos? He's thinking to himself. Yes, the internal dialogue is, you got to be kidding me. It's Castellanos again? I'm just trying to bury goddamn George. And here comes Castellanos again, making me a mockery, a laughingstock on the internet.
President Kennedy has been shot. His condition is unknown. And Willie Mays hits a grounder. And he'll round the bases at first.
Castellanos home runs 2 times. Stan, we've missed you, buddy. We've missed you. You seemed deeply unhappy. It seemed unpleasant to do what it is that you do for a living. Am I right? Stugotz, how many times have we had this conversation about how miserable Stan seems, and he keeps choosing the heroin addiction of misery?
He looks miserable while he's in it, but he was losing. He was, 31-41, but he looks miserable while he's in it, and then he's laying on a bed laughing with me. I don't understand it.
What was that sound? Is something happening in your hotel room? I got a note last night from
No. I'm not in the hotel room. I'm in the media room, and they're starting to set up here, Dan, because, the tournament's getting underway. There's a big tournament this weekend out here in Lake Tahoe. They're starting to set up the media room.
Out by the lake, yes. Leaf blowers. I was trying to think of something that could be more noisily inefficient than a leaf blower. Like literally a cement truck, anything. There's nothing that could have been worse than someone trying to blow a leaf with something louder than a leaf blower. The most inefficient creation in the history of inventions.
I see your leaf blower and I raise you a cement truck that's backing up. Because you get the and then the beep.
I know, but at least in that case, it's moving around tons of cement. In this case, you're blowing a leaf. It seems like a really inefficient, loud way to get to something.
I could do it with my mouth.
That could be done much quieter. There has to be. Stan, are you in agreement that we have to do better than the leaf blower? In 2021, as Bezos and Branson try and beat each other into space, the leaf blower is a mountain of noisy shit.
Well, it is inefficient, but it's a lot of fun. I mean, it's a lot of fun to just blow the leaves around. I mean, that's a lot better than that. I mean, most of us aren't going to drive a cement truck, but the leaf blower, we can just get out there and blow the leaves all around. Now, to actually corral the leaves, you're eventually going to have to use a rake, but not as much fun as a leaf blower.
How much housework are you doing these days that you didn't have time for?
Well, I have my morning routine. I get up, feed the animals, clean up the kitchen, stuff like that. I basically want to be done with any type of labor whatsoever by 8 o'clock in the morning. That's it for the day. Like from 7 to 8, I'm a whirlwind of activity. And then I positively want to be done at that point.
Guillermo, put it on the poll, please. Are you surprised that from 7 to 8 a.m., Stan Van Gundy is a whirlwind of activity? So you said, you broke the news on STUpodity that you were never on the same page late in the season here, clearly, with management. I don't know what that means.
Well, just, people have different views on coaching, what coaching is, how you judge coaching, what's important to you. And it became clear as we were talking that we just didn't view things the same way. And I think that happens from time to time, quite honestly.
But it happened so fast, and I was reading between the lines and just assuming, oh, wait, young players didn't like the tough love.
Yeah, I'm sure that they didn't, and I'm sure that, David Griffin got some feedback of that nature and the whole thing. And then that's one of the things, like, to me, I don't really worry about that a whole lot. I mean, to me, it's about how players perform and everything else. It'd be great if everybody loved everything going on, but it's not something that I would worry about too much. But then again, I mean, I'm different maybe than they were and everything else. That's what I'm talking about. One of the things I'm talking about not being on the same page. So, in the long run, it'll be better for everybody. You certainly need alignment between your coach and your front office. So it'll be better for everybody, I think. And my wife and I will move on with our life and be very, very happy. So,
Stan, I'm curious. You said you guys weren't on the same page on what coaching is, which seems to be much bigger than, hey, I think we need to play a little bit more up tempo, or I think we need to, focus more on limiting 3-pointers allowed. What page were you on when it comes to coaching as a profession that was kind of not congruous with the way management was thinking?
Well, I think that, my priority was, for good and bad. I mean, I can certainly, was not trying to diminish, the faults that we had and the things that we didn't do well as a team. But I felt that the focus should be on what went on the court, what was good, what was bad, all of that. I think that Griff was more concerned with the atmosphere around the team and the happiness of people and things like that. That was probably the biggest difference. If I would have gone into a meeting and somebody would have said, hey, you were 31-41 and that's not good enough, I got no problem with that. I mean, that's what we sign up for in this business, right? I mean, regardless of circumstances, that's what we sign up for in this business. So, but that's not, what it came down to, or at least not what I heard. It was just we look at things totally differently in terms of what's important.
We've got some things happening around here. Guillermo, why are you laughing? Why are you trying to suppress a smile? What is happening over there? Explain it to me.
There's a little private conversation happening.
No, I noticed. This is happening in Zoom meetings across the land where people are on their phones and they're chatting. Stan was making important, serious points, and Guillermo had a smirk on his face, and the shipping container, I think, was laughing about something else. So, Guillermo, give it up. What were you guys doing?
Well, before we started, Stan was talking to us about his 4th of July and just pontoon boats. So I made my own list of top 10 coaches. It was supposed to be a top 5 list of coaches I'd go on a pontoon boat with, and then it became 10 when I started looking through it. And Stugotz and I were kind of having a private chat of who we'd go on pontoon boats with.
Is that list complete? Can we get to the list of top 10 coaches Billy wants to go on a pontoon boat with? Because Stan does need to get out of here. He needs to get to his boat.
I just want to know if I'm on the list once they started talking about it.
All right, maybe that'll be the big payoff at the end of the segment. But what was the shipping container laughing about?
Well, this actually fits into the conversation that we were having about deep flies to deep left by Castellanos, because the previous segment that we had, we were joined by Jemele Hill, and we were discussing the awkward Maria Taylor and Rachel Nichols story, and Dan says something poignant. However, some sound comes out of his body, which I can only compare to a line drive hit into the gap.
Okay, so this is... All right, let's hear this.
Oh, God, I can't wait to hear it.
It led pretty directly to Maria Taylor's rise at the company and her profile at the company and her voice at the company. Woo! That was a smoke. Castellanos got in the middle of that. Hit one right. What is that sound? Is that coming out of my body? And Amin, you were right next to me. Did you hear it?
Not originally.
Okay, that's so embarrassing because now everyone knows that's how I fart.
It sounds more like a tennis racket.
It's batting practice. I am ropes down the left field line.
It sounds more like tennis. Like right coming down the baseline. And...
No, that sounds like wood hitting a baseball.
Better than 1-in-track power right there.
Have you, Amin and Stan, I saw Stan saying no one gets an asterisk, but I have had this thing. I mean, the meat grinder has been so greedy and obvious to get to the TV contract, money that is obligated, and the season has been so distorted in terms of the measurements that even though Phoenix is a wonderful story, and I would love to see, if he's healthy enough, Giannis win a championship, the way they've gotten here has been so greedily grotesque that it has ruined the measurement for me.
Yeah, I will say, look, it can be both things, right? I mean, you can celebrate Phoenix, and there's certainly no asterisk whatsoever. I mean, they've just played whoever showed up, and at the same time acknowledge that we have never seen anyone have a run of playoff good fortune in terms of injuries to the other teams that we have seen with Phoenix. So they're down 2-1 in the first round to LA, and then Anthony Davis plays 25 minutes the rest of the series. They very well could have been out in the first round. And then they get Denver without Jamal Murray, and then they get the Clippers without Kawhi Leonard and others as the series went on. And now they're going to open the series probably against Milwaukee without Giannis. So we've never seen anybody go through 4 rounds with that kind of good fortune. And I don't see what's wrong with acknowledging that. You can still celebrate, which I do, Phoenix as a team and the year they've had. I'm not trying to tear them down at all, but to not acknowledge the good fortune they've had is just denying reality.
Yeah, the weird thing is people want to blame this on the league scheduling and the pandemic, and the reality is most of these injuries were impact injuries. Kyrie stepping on a foot, Kawhi Leonard landing awkwardly, Trae Young tripping over a referee's foot, Giannis having Capella barrel into his knee, which, by the way, for that to all happen, and now there's rumors and whispers that he's ready to come back and he's working out, is pretty ridiculous. But my point is, most of these injuries were not because of the wear and tear of a crazy schedule. Most of them were because someone stepped on something or something fell into them.
You don't believe that the sheer amount of games and playing, turning things over in 48 hours. Well, Stan, you could speak to the wear and tear on the body. When I was talking to Miami Heat people, they were saying there were no practices. It was just all play games and repair.
Well, I think that part's true. And certainly for teams like Miami and the Lakers who played in the finals last year, I don't think there's any doubt that there was some wear and tear. But Amin's right as far as the injuries. These have been, contact type injuries. They've been collision injuries. They haven't been, really the soft tissue injury that probably made a difference in the playoffs was James Harden.
Yes.
That's the one. His was a soft tissue injury, could certainly be attributed to wear and tear, conditioning, wherever you go with that. But the rest of them have been collision injuries, and they would have, I think, occurred regardless. I think as much as the physical part, the wear and tear on the players in this season was mental.
Mm-hmm.
It was terrible. For these guys to play, in empty arenas and then not have their routine when they're on the road, not even be able to go out to dinner, and play the games as often as they did. I thought there was an incredible mental toll on players this year, more so even than the physical toll.
Stan, I would never suggest someone with your expertise and acumen in this sport, the game has passed him by. But when we have on our show today, Stan, you will hear from a journalist embedded in the Nets organization, and you will hear things that you haven't heard about how the players simply run that organization in a way that hasn't happened. At the end of the super team era, that team was given a very specific power that I, who am not naive about these things, have never seen a group of players given. You coached a very young team. It sounds like from what you just said that there was a generational disconnect between how you coach and not caring about being liked versus coaching a team of millennials. And I'm fascinated by where you stand philosophically there, because you're 40 years removed from wherever the connection points are with these players, and these players have taken over this league.
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, by the way. I honestly don't. I've been somebody who's in favor of player empowerment. They're the league. That's why we have a league. That's why people watch. Why should they not have power over where they want to play and things like that? So I don't have any problem with that. I simply come from a coaching standpoint that if you want to know, how good a relationship is between a coach and a player or a coach and a team, watch them play. That's what matters. Pat Riley used to say all the time, we were hired, coaches and players, by the same person, to get a result. That's the relationship. This is a professional relationship designed to get a result. And so if the player is playing well that is a successful player-coach relationship. And I go back to Dwight Howard. He got tired of me. He asked him to fire me and the whole thing. And people ask about my relationship with him. And I say, well, a lot of wins, a finals appearance. Dwight was first-team All-NBA 5 straight years, a Defensive Player of the Year 3 straight years. We won a lot of games. I'm saying great relationship.
Stan,
it's not whether the guy likes you or not, because a lot of people like coaches and then they perform like crap. What kind of relationship is that? That's not like I'm not looking, and I don't think the players are either. Like I got guys, my whole roster was 23 or younger. What do you think? Those guys want to hang out with me? Like, no, they don't. I don't think they're looking for that. So give them more credit than that. I don't think they expect to be babied. I don't like the idea that, the players are so different than they ever were. They're realizing the power that they have. I didn't have a problem with any of my players. If they didn't like the way I was coaching them, that's up to them. But I didn't have a problem with anybody.
Stan, what was the conversation like when you got hired? Did you guys I'm just trying to figure out how such a fundamental disconnect could happen in the span of one season.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I wish I could answer that for you. I think we were in a little different place as a team when I got hired. I mean, if you go back even to, my press conference when I got it, I talked about one of the things I really liked was the combination they had on their roster of talented young guys and veteran guys. And the veteran guys went by the wayside quickly. I mean, Drew Holiday was out the door, and Etuan Moore was out the door. Kenrich Williams was out the door. Derek Favors was out the door. And then JJ went halfway through the year. And so we just became really, really, really young. And we went into the year talking about it, being all about winning. And that sort of changed as the year went on, in some people's minds, not in mine. And so it was a little bit different, just in terms of what the approach should have been. All the young guys got better. I think if you go back and look at the 7 guys that we had the year before I got there and how they played that year and how they played this year, everybody made strides. You're an advanced analytics guy. You can look at all those numbers and say every one of those guys made strides. Everybody got better in the course of the year. We got hurt late in the year, but the numbers will say we got a lot better. So I thought there were some good things. I mean, there were some bad things too. We never got a hold of, taking care of the ball, and we were one of the worst shooting teams in the league, but still had the 11th best offense. I mean, I thought on the court is how it should have been judged. And like I said, you walk in and say, we're 31 and 41, that's not good enough. We all get that.
Stan, I'm curious, had you been younger, right? How much of this decision is just like, I don't need to do this? Like I heard you say the conversation was mutual because they said they didn't want me and I don't want to be anywhere where I'm not wanted. But had you been a younger coach, like you'd only had one job before this, you coached for 2 or 3 years as a head coach, would you have fought harder to stay and try and work this out?
I don't know that would have worked anyway. I mean, look, they, it was Griff's decision and it's his decision to make. I don't have any problem with that. It would have hurt a lot more. I mean, you're trying to, you're in your 40s trying to build a career or something like that, back where I was in 2003, when I started as a head coach, it would have been a lot harder to deal with. I don't know that I would have handled it any differently, but it would have been a lot harder to deal with.
Tremendous show today, but not enough time devoted to how a sound came from Dan's body, and it sounds like stand-up double. So to put this in context, to show exactly how much it sounds like a gapper, we put it into the Castellanos eulogy sound, and it sounds even more spectacular.
Well, that's a great life, 96 years. And Pat, just like his dad, went to KU. He also went to Bishop Ward High School. There's a drive into deep
Holy
field.
shit! What a smoke! That ball started rising over the shortstop's head and went right out of the park. What do you mean ground rule double?
Yeah, you smoked that. We
God.
also put it into the Bredeman apology. If you just give me a second, I can find that too. Because
All right,
that was
feel
incredible.
free. I'll call them BS. I don't think they did anything. They just played the same sound.
Castellanos to lead things off. Jim Day's going to be taking us the rest of the way through this game as Holland takes over on the mound. I made a comment earlier tonight that I guess went out over the air that I am deeply ashamed of. If I have hurt anyone out there, I can't tell you how much I say from the bottom of my heart. I'm so very, very sorry. I pride myself and think of myself as a man of faith. As there's a drive in a deep left field by Castellanos.
That is amazing. It is better than the actual sound made by Castellanos' bat. It is unbelievable.
And it's louder, which is a little disturbing.
It is clearly a 600-foot home run. Stan, it's good to have you back. We will talk to you, I hope, next week. I hope we can get some time with you in and around the boating days. Do you have some basketball insight for us before? Can you accurately make an appraisal on the finals when a key component might be missing?
You know, this is my expert analysis, and this is what you pay for. Milwaukee's a lot better team when Giannis is healthy and playing.
Okay, there it is. Ladies and gentlemen, we are happy to have him back.
Excellent.
He has been let go and now is available to us. We are thrilled. May you never have another coaching job to make you miserable so that you can hear these sounds make you laugh for the rest of your life. He had no time.
Absolutely. We'll have fun. We'll certainly get some laughter in. I know that. Anytime I listen to you, even if I'm not on, I'm laughing. So.
No time for laughter in his life the last few months whenever he is coaching. You realize, right, that it's deeply unhealthy. Please stop doing it. On behalf of someone and a group of people who care about you, please stop doing it.
Well, I very much appreciate your concern.
Billy, do you have your list, your top 10 coaches? But let's get him out of here on the right note and see if Stan Van Gundy did make Billy's list of top 10 coaches he wants to spend time on a pontoon boat with.
All right, number 10. And guys, this was tough because this one could have gone regular boat, pontoon boat, speedboat. Now, just a quick piece of advice or backstory. NBA, NFL, MLB, and college football. That's where I got these coaches from. Number 10, Lane Kiffin.
Good answer. Good answer.
Yes, we're going to be...
I can see that one. I'd like to do that. I'll take Lane out on my boat.
Number 9.
Mike Tomlin.
Splash.
Number 8.
Mac Brown.
Mac Brown?
Yeah.
Why?
Hey, just looks like he'd be fun on a pontoon boat.
All right, now, put it on the poll, Guillermo. Does Mac Brown just look like he'd be fun on a pontoon boat? Number 7.
Nick Saban.
He looks like he'd be fun to you on a... Okay. Number 6.
Buck Showalter.
I mean, what's happening with this list? What is happening?
What's the matter with
it? I mean, just number 5. I mean, that's very serious, people. Number 5.
Tito Francona.
He'd be fun.
He would be fun.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
His first good one. What number are we on?
Oh, no, Lane Kiffin was a good one,
yes.
too.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And Mac
Steve.
Brown.
Number 4.
Don Nelson.
Gin drinking Don Nelson.
He ain't drinking gin anymore.
Now he's smoking weed now, right? Number 3.
Riverboat Ron.
No?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know why.
I knew that, Bill.
He would be on the list of people I wouldn't want to go on a pontoon boat with.
Put it on the poll, Guillermo.
Oh, no. He's totally different on a pontoon.
Put it on the poll. Are Ron Rivera, Buck Showalter, and Nick Saban the opposite of people you would want to be on a pontoon boat with? Number 2.
Jim Caldwell.
I love Jim Caldwell. We were in Detroit together. I love Jim. Seriously.
I was not expecting
He would be
that.
fun. I'll take Jim Lane Kiffin on my boat, Tito Francona, anytime. That'd be a good boat ride.
I am floored right now at Stan Van Gundy getting in there aggressively with love for Jim Caldwell.
Love Jim Caldwell.
Shocker.
It came out of nowhere. The most passion we've heard from Stan Van Gundy.
Listen, like Detroit, think what's happened to the Lions since he left. He had them playing good football.
You're right. Yep.
Yeah, Jim Caldwell's a good coach. Players loved him. I mean, Andy got it done on the field, and they got rid of him. Class act. I'll take Jim Caldwell on my pontoon boat.
Class act. Speaking of Detroit coaches, a quote from the new Lions coach, Dan Campbell, quote, I said, look, I'm not carrying around your toilet paper. I'm not going to wipe your butt. You're going to wipe your own butt. You handle it. and I'll treat you like men until you prove otherwise. Your thoughts, Stan
I don't think
Van
he'd
Gundy.
enjoy a pontoon boat.
Your thoughts, Stan Van
That's a great
Gundy.
quote, but I don't know Dan Campbell, so he's not going on my boat.
Okay, you do know him, though. That quote, you do know him. There he is.
See, that could only come in the NFL, too. You're not getting that quote in the NBA or Major League Baseball. You're not getting that. College football, pro football, you got it. Football, it's a whole different world as far as coaches. It really is.
Maybe you'd still have a job if you were wandering around with a little toilet paper for your young guys.
Nah, I mean, my guys didn't need that. They really didn't. I mean, they took care of themselves. They were professional as hell. I liked the guys on that team. I really did.
The number one coach that Billy wants to spend time on a pontoon boat with.
All right. I got a victory. I got a victory.
I didn't hear it. That was muted, so I didn't even hear it. But
Dan, we've got to somehow figure out when all this is over and you guys can start going back on the road like you went to New York and the whole thing, you got to come up to Central Florida and we got to do a show from the pontoon boat.
On the boat.
Oh, wow.
Yes. On the boat.
A remote. If things aren't hard enough
So many
here
plain
now.
potato chips. We're going to eat so many plain potato chips, aren't we, Stan?
Yeah, actually, Chris, that's a great point because yesterday on the boat, somebody had flavored potato chips.
Oh, God, the worst.
And I allowed it. I allowed it on the boat because it was family and friends, but I'm morally opposed to it.
What was the flavor?
It was very hard for me to watch people on my boat eating flavored potato chips.
What was the flavor?
It was cheese and it was the Ruffles.
Sour cream and cheddar?
Better and
Oh, those are good.
Those are so
They
good,
were
Stan.
red.
Be careful.
Red.
Disgusting. Like plain chips, a nice dip. That's what we should have been going with. But I allowed other people to make a decision on the boat. I don't know that I can continue to do that because it bothered me the entire trip.
We miss you. We are happy to have you back. We are happy to see your smiling face. We are happy to hear your wrong potato chip opinions. We are happy to be surprised by your professed love for Jim Caldwell. Thank you for being...
Oh, shocking that happened today.
We've been doing this show for many years, and I don't know that I've ever been more shocked than just this aggressively strong Jim Caldwell love. Thank you for being on with us, Stan. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. And Billy, thanks for putting me at the top of the list, babe.
We didn't
Sour
hear
cream.
it. We assumed that it was Stan Van Gundy on the top of the list. Only
I heard it.
Stan
I heard it.
And Stugotz heard it.
I heard it.
See you later. Good to have you back,
All right.
Stan.
Bye-bye.